want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British, man. Quite frankly, you was kings, Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners. Raised up the children to worship their images. Set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them. And this shit get way deeper than your pigment.
What if I told you that everything you've been taught about who Black Americans are is incomplete? Not slightly off, not misunderstood, but fundamentally wrong. Because if the identity you were given was the result of racial reclassification, then that means that millions of people today don't actually know who they are. And today we're not speculating. We're going to discuss the history, the documentation, the evidence. You see, I've got a very, very special guest who's going to be joining us tonight. Some of you already know who he is. Some of you guys, this will be a first-time introduction, but the name of his YouTube channel is UBTV. And he's been breaking down ancient indigenous Black American history, challenging narratives, and bringing forward information that most people were never taught. Now, this is not a surface level conversation. Tonight, we're talking about identity, origins, reclassification, and the question that's going to make a lot of people uncomfortable. Were Native Black Americans actually indigenous to this land? So before we even get started, I want you to do something. Everybody in the chat right now, let me know, where do you believe Black Americans come from? Africa? Indigenous to America? Both? Are you not sure? Drop it in the chat right now. And before we bring up our honored guest, UBTV, for those of you that are unfamiliar with his work, I want to play you guys a quick clip so you can get a slight introduction.
What happened to the Maya? Some people claim that the Maya never left and are the people still living in the old Maya-occupied territories. However, the most common theory is that they were wiped out by the Spanish, mostly due to disease. But is there any chance that some of the Maya could have relocated? There have been reports that stated that some of the Maya did relocate to Guatemala after the fall of the Maya Empire. But is there a chance that the Maya could have relocated to the north end of the Gulf Coast? Specifically around Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, or Florida? Because apparently there are some very strong cultural connections and even strong archaeological connections, especially at the Crystal River site in Florida, where Mayan hieroglyphics were found and a cache of other Mayan artifacts buried in a temple mound complex. This mound complex just happened to be constructed with a similar layout, design, and astronomical alignment to Venus as the Mayan complexes in the Yucatan. But this isn't where the connections end. Many of the places and names associated with Florida, Georgia, and to a lesser extent the Southeast are Itza Mayan in origin, especially cities, mountains, and rivers. The Itza Maya language was one of the last variations spoken during the fall of the Mayan Empire in the late 1600s. Itza Mayan words of places and names that may sound familiar are names like Tallahassee, Muskogee, Letici, Okeechobee, Appalachie, Etowah, Catawba, Chickamauga, Tallulah. Any word with Hoochie or Hatchie is of Itza Mayan origin, meaning creek or shallow river. Rivers like the Tallahatchie, the Chattahoochee, any river with a Hatchie or a Hoochie, or even a Coochie for that matter, is of Itza Mayan origin.
Come on, now you see why I regard UBTV as a national treasure when it comes to revealing this hidden history. I mean, it wasn't until I started watching his content that I realized not just our indigenous roots in the Southeast, but the cultural parallels and the cultural continuity between Southeastern tribes and the Maya, the Olmec, those tribes from the Caribbean, Central and South America. I hope that you guys who have not checked out his content definitely go over to his channel, like and subscribe. This is where you can find him on YouTube, UBTV. And without further ado, let's bring up the man of the hour. How you doing, brother?
Peace, peace. Thanks for having me, man. Happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining. Thanks for joining. Before we get started, why don't you give the folks a quick introduction for those who aren't familiar with you? I know a lot of folks already are, but
Let's see here. UBTV. My name is Uriah Brandon. I originally am from North Carolina. I have been doing documentaries on not just ancient American history, ancient world history, biblical history, genetics, and quote unquote Black history. I've been doing this independently for probably close to 10 years now. That's really when I first started making my first long form content. But overall, I consider myself a historian and a filmmaker and a documentarian.
nice, nice. Well, I'm definitely a big fan of your work, and the thing that I love the most is although your whole channel isn't exclusively about Black indigeneity, like you said, you touch other parts, religious aspects, Babylon, America's Egypt, and whatnot. But it seems like an underlying current is always our indigenous roots in America. It seems like, especially your earlier work I came across, you were really trying to push back on the whole out of Africa theory, and American Negroes exclusively come from West African slaves
Right.
and whatnot. But how did you first get started with this research? I'm sure something would have had to happen to where you're like, wait a minute, something I've been taught my whole life isn't adding up.
I mean, honestly, I just have a natural aptitude for history. I didn't really, it wasn't even a thing I considered at the time I was in school. I just was naturally interested in history. And then I got into the content creation world, just trying to make independent videos. And they started off very superficial, I mean, I came from being a Pan-Africanist. You see what I'm saying? So I've made this, I've made the revolution. And honestly, man, when I started making content, people were really looking to me to provide them answers. So it just made me very serious about the study of history and the study of many historical subjects, by the way, but especially our history. And then I started getting into trying to get into the Pan-African history. And it was, it didn't take me very long to realize that it was total BS. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't take very much time at all. And just being a person who pays attention to the details, I don't even think you don't have to be like a genius to understand that we're not from Africa. Okay. But, being a person who paid attention to the details, those things kind of interest me. So I just made it, really, I made it a goal of mine to dig as deep into our history as I could. And of course, we've been here. We're here. We've been here. We ain't been nowhere else.
Except for those of us who got hoodwinked into getting on Garvey's Black Star Line or going to Liberia or something, right?
Right. The Spirit Cruise. We call that the Spirit Cruise. He didn't get enough heads to book the Spirit Cruise. That's why.
That's right.
That's why we don't know if Garvey actually ever stepped foot in Africa. We still don't know that. According to the historians of Garvey, they don't have any accounts of Garvey being in Africa, even though that's, he was trying to get everybody else to go to Africa. He wanted to go to London.
Yeah, fun fact. Fun fact. You guys can definitely fact check that on your own. But yeah, Garvey, who was trying to convince our ancestors to get on his boat to Africa, when he finally got released from federal prison for scamming us with fraudulent shares of his Black Star Line, he went to London. I believe he passed in London. And then they brought his remains back and buried him in a Jamaican National Heroes Park or something like that. But guys, I tell you time and time again, it's crazy how the biggest Pan-Africanists don't even want to be in Africa themselves.
Right. And he was a very useful tool. He was a very useful tool for the old school white supremacists.
Oh yeah, definitely. I've actually found in my research on Walter Plecker letters where he's using Garvey and his movement to discredit Black Americans' indigenous claims. I even saw, I believe Garvey himself wrote a letter to the leader of the KKK talking about they have common goal, right? So it's
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna get into it though. We're gonna get into it. And actually I do have a clip that I'll play of yours that kind of dives in to Garvey a little bit. But the next question I have for you is, what was the first piece of information that made you question the mainstream narrative? I mean, I'm sure it was some years back, but can you remember the first thing that made you go, hold on, I gotta start digging a little further?
In terms of this information, to be honest with you, man, I'm drawing a blank. Maybe it'll come to me. The first piece of information that made me start to question, I think would have to be the slave numbers. I think the statistics were the first. I think that was like the first like real information that I was like, hold on now. Like, I'll be trying to break it down mathematically. So if they did this, and you know what I mean? So from my memory, nothing really sticks out to me, but I do know.
Let me reframe the question. Let me reframe it. So you're a Pan-Africanist at one point in time, and it sounds like maybe the slave statistic numbers is the first thing that kind of made you wake up out of the spirit of Pan-Africanism.
Right.
And I know that back in the day, they actually used to say in the 80s and the 90s, mainstream academics and Africana studies professors used to estimate 100 million African slaves were shipped over.
Yeah.
Was that the number that you came across? I was like,
I have made a comment because it's almost like this, it's like this badge of oppression that salty niggas like to wear, Negroes, whoever, salty indigenous blacks most of the time, when we're throwing a pity party about how we've been oppressed here in this country, it starts off with 100 million taken. You know what I mean? And those numbers kind of like they slowly dwindled, because I remember a time when people were literally espousing those numbers like it was a legit statistic. 100 million. Now beyond that, think about the logistics of that during a time when the boats were wooden, and what are we talking about? So that's where I can say for some reason that definitely sparked, definitely raised my antennas of a speculation.
I got you,
to say the least.
Sure. And for those who aren't aware with mainstream academia's latest update, correct me if I'm wrong, but they went all the way from 100 million down to 12.5.
Yeah,
and then out
12.5.
of the 12.5, they say 10.5 survives, but they admit out of their own mouths that out of the 10.5 million they alleged survived the voyage, less than 4% actually came to North America.
Right. A small number, an extremely small number, especially in comparison to the fact that the slave numbers in the South changed once they developed the census in 1790 to 1860 and new claimed territories of Indian land, but there were no Indians. There were all quote unquote people who ended up in slavery. So, they like to play slick and loose with the numbers. And the expectation, I think, for a long time was to be able to not even count on the fact that we would be able to read maybe or understand the history. I don't get it. I don't get it. Are they like, well, it's the game has been played already. Like, it's kind of like with anything else. It's like, fuck it, let our grandkids worry about it. Like, they just sell the next generation down the river. Like, fuck it. Those niggers will be mad at some point. They'll be mad in 200 years, but I'll be dead and gone by then. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think it's the former. I think they never even thought that we would be able to read. That's why they outlawed us reading, outlawed us having education. Right. So it's like, not only can we read, but we have the internet.
We can do math,
not only the internet, yeah, we can do math. We even have artificial intelligence where I can transcribe your great-great-granddad's bullshit old English chicken scratch and see exactly what he was writing about in the 1700s, right? So it's like, I don't think they ever thought that we'd have this access to information, because if they did foresee that, I think they would have been a little bit more slick with how they hid things. Because once you start looking into this research, it's just right in front of your face. Like, it's not like you really have to look that hard in some cases.
Yeah. And to piggyback off what you're saying, that's why some of my favorite literature is the old literature, because these guys weren't tied down by any outside agendas to, manipulate the information in their work. They could literally be interested in something like, oh, I'm going to go study these Indians that live over here, and just write down things that they thought were true, without any quote unquote agenda, although there are still some agendas, obviously. But overall, the work, you know, a 200-year-old book is more honest than a 50-year-old book or a 20-year-old book.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Absolutely. And if I remember the first time I came across your content, I had some people coming into my live streams and stuff, and they were throwing around the phrase, America is Egypt. And I'm going to be totally honest. There's so many pseudo scholars in our community. One minute they talking about we're the real Jews. Next minute they're saying we're Hebrew Israelites. Next thing they're saying we're more sovereign citizens. So I kind of have blinders on and I just focus on the indigenous American history.
No, I understand.
But somebody had name dropped you in my chat and they were like, no, America is Egypt. Check out UBTV. And I went to watch your series with full skepticism. I said, here we go. Another dude gonna take me on a pseudo rabbit hole. But I watch, I listen, I had an open mind, and I was like, oh, that's what he means. So for those who haven't watched your America is Egypt series in length, if you were to give us like a brief synopsis on what do you mean when you say America is Egypt? Because some people may hear that phrase and be jarred, might be like, wait, what? I mean, Egypt has the pyramids. Egypt has Giza. There's nothing like that in the Americas, right?
Right. What I mean by that phrase is when we are speaking about the history, biblical history, the events of mythology and legend that were said to have occurred in the Middle East, right? Those events occurred in America. America is the setting for the biblical events, the events, quote unquote, of mythology in the Bible. And if you were to actually read the book, if you were to actually to pay attention to the verses, there's no other place on earth it could be. We just have the geographic layout that no other continent has, by the way, that is actually being written about in the book. So there are certain descriptions of certain features of land, of certain, I would say predominant features of land that could be nowhere else on earth. Obviously, one of those would be the Mississippi River, okay, which is the Euphrates, not the Nile. Okay, the Nile is a Greek word that came along later as an adjective for tributary creek or stream, or another word for tributary creek or stream, excuse me, a synonym, so to speak. And also we have the Western Sea on the border of what we would call Lebanon, which the cedars of Lebanon are the tallest and most magnificent trees written about in scripture. They can't be anywhere else on earth. They would have to be in the West. It would either have to be the great sequoia or the great redwood. This is, if you believe that another tree is considered the cedar of Lebanon on earth, and also if you believe that the cedars of Lebanon, that they claim are the cedars of Lebanon, are any greater than the redwood forest, you are smoking all kinds of crack. And it doesn't matter. At this point, you could just be objective. It's okay to admit we all get lied to. We've all been lied to about it. And it's okay if, I think a lot of times people just get mad because they learned something and now it's like they felt like what they learned, they have to throw it in the trash now. Yes, you learned some BS. It's not over there, it's over here. So if you went over there thinking that Egypt itself is a theme park, okay? There's no evidence that the pyramids were there before the 1700s. And furthermore, if Egypt was a Roman city and had been occupied since at least the 1st century AD, how could no one ever transcribe anything on the pyramids or the hieroglyphics? How could anyone translate the hieroglyphics how come no one could translate the hieroglyphics until Napoleon came with the French? And this is after the French had already ransacked the middle part of North America. So no one knew anything about the Egyptian language prior to 1800. Just like the idea that Memphis, Tennessee is named after the city of Memphis in Egypt. First of all, Memphis was named before the history was even transcribed. They couldn't even read hieroglyphics yet. So the idea that someone could then, oh yeah, I remember Memphis, Egypt from what? You remember it from what? The hieroglyphics that have yet to be transcribed? So it's all been BS. And a lot of these
places have been named by Freemasons. They, a lot of people hold the secret. I want to say a lot of people, a few people do. But, these places weren't named by mistake. The Mississippi is not named by mistake. The indigenous meaning of Mississippi is the Great River. The Mississippi means Great River. The Euphrates means Great River.
And I believe the Mississippi
seven,
and the whole Mississippi Delta region and river tributary system, I believe that's so much larger than the Nile River, right?
Oh yeah, it's not even close. And the historical footprint of the Mississippi.
They just play this weird little trick where there's literally parts of the Mississippi and they'll just rename them as if it's a separate river when it's literally all connected to the Mississippi River.
Right, exactly. So, and that's another thing. The Nile doesn't have any natural tributaries other than the White and Blue Nile, which is another section of the same river. Whereas the Mississippi has the 7 tributaries that are described in Isaiah 11:15. The Nile doesn't have it, but it also is pertaining to the Euphrates, which is called the Great River. And the Nile isn't like I said, the Nile is a new school term. Once they started trying to flip and trick, because that's what they do. They're shysters and tricksters, okay? We can start to imagine who started doing the shysting and the tricking, right? Without, without getting flagged by the community. We can imagine who did that.
Let's just say they didn't wear big hats. They wore small ones.
Man, yeah, or they might have had horns at that time. Who knows? But that's beside the fact, right?
And again,
the geographic descriptions.
Real quick. There's so many different points that you're making, and they're really, really, really solid points. But for people who are not familiar with this information, they're going to be like, Mike, what are you talking about? This just sounds crazy, yada, 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 yada. So let me just go through a few of the points that you've made, and actually have a couple of images here as well. Because when you actually see it for yourself, instead of just hearing somebody talk about it, then it starts to hit a little bit different. So right now we do have an image of the stream on the screen of the Mississippi tributary system, and you guys see how the Mississippi River really spawns across the entire North America. Of course, it stops somewhere around the Great Lakes or so. But again, maybe it didn't. I believe they dammed that area heavily. I believe that the Great Lakes region underwent a lot of man-made features, just like the West Coast, where we've got like thousands and thousands of dams. So without all these dams, we can only imagine how vast the Mississippi River would truly run. But now let's juxtapose this to an image of the Nile. I got an image of the Nile right here. A lot of you guys have just been programmed since you were young to, the Nile River, that's the biggest river in the world, Egypt, da-da-da-da. This is the Nile, is it not?
Yep.
Doesn't look that grand. I mean, biggest river for Africa, probably, but compare that to the Mississippi River tributary system spanning all this length. Another thing I want to touch on is you said was it the cedar of
Lebanon?
Cedar of Lebanon.
Cedar of Lebanon.
Now, I don't even get too deep in the scriptures to know about it, but when I saw videos and you were speaking of it, being that I'm from the West Coast, being that I've spent many years in the Pacific Northwest, I immediately think of those ginormous redwood trees. Guys, this is just the base of a redwood tree. Those 2 little people in the crack, that's a size representation for you. I mean, on the Pacific Northwest, we have such huge redwoods that they've actually gutted some of them and built roads, and you can drive right through them. You can drive your car through the tree.
Right.
So for those that are into the scripture, that do hear about the cedars of Lebanon and stuff, where else could it be other than in the Americas? Furthermore, a video that really, really opened my eyes to it is you did something about Egypt and the biblical narrative of parting the Red Sea. And in the video, you explained that the Red Sea would have been basically right around California. And at first I'm like, Red Sea, California, what are we talking about? But then in your video, I believe you even showed this exact image where the first ever mapped out display of California displayed it as an island, because the Spanish, when they came, I think they probably came during flood season, but they depicted it as an island. And unless you're from California, like I am, some of you guys might be on the East Coast, might be in the Southeast. Y'all don't know we have so many dams and we flood historically. And if it wasn't for all the dams, the thousands of dams, we literally would have an seasonal inland sea. You literally would have to get on your boat to travel around if you're living anywhere in that part that looks like the inland sea. But they terraform our land through dredging, through damming. For those of you in California, you may not know that the Oroville Dam sits on top of the indigenous settlement of the Maidu tribe. So there's a lot of not just recent Black towns that have been buried beneath man-made lakes, but ancient indigenous civilizations as well. Now, the last point that I want to cover is when you talk about America as Egypt, can you touch a little bit on the pyramids? Because I know some people are finally realizing that the oldest pyramids in the world are in the Americas, that the largest pyramid in the world by volume is in the Americas. But, you know, if you can just drop some gems on that, because a lot of people still think to Egypt when they think about pyramids.
Right. And there's no mention of pyramids in the Bible, right? There's no mention of pyramids in the Old Testament. And that's kind of like beside the fact. Academia has done a good job of brainwashing the general public into making false associations. So I think because people generally believe that they've been told the truth, they look at those pyramids and the scholars say that they're 5,000 years old. They just take it and run with it, right? What can't be denied is the fact that, of course, the Americas has, I don't know, 1,000 times more pyramids than any other area on earth, including Egypt, which doesn't even come close in comparison, nor does the civilizational footprint, by the way. Okay. It's only the only history exists right there on the banks of the Nile, right? There's no history out in the desert. That has been basically a relatively desolate, unpopulated area for as long as we know. Okay. And they haven't come back with any large cache of artifacts and or hidden civilizations. But as far as the pyramids go, listen, we have more pyramids than Egypt. Not that pyramids have anything to do with Egypt necessarily. Most of everything that you've been heard about Egypt comes from academia. I'm not talking about academia's Egypt, by the way. We're talking about the mythology of the Bible, okay? As opposed to these places that have been named far later than the events, okay? Places get changed every time they get ruled and conquered. Somebody comes in and changes the place of a name, the name of a place. So yes, we have plenty of pyramids. The interesting thing about our pyramids in the Americas, okay, is the fact that when you find a pyramid, you usually find a king buried up under there. When you go to Egypt, there's nothing under the pyramid or in the pyramid. So they say that these were tombs for the pharaohs. You know, you hear all this mythology, conjecture. It's not a tomb. It's literally what we see in Egypt is a non-functional pyramid, where what we see in the Americas is a very functional pyramid. It's actually a place where ceremonies happen, all kinds of things happen. Okay, they use the pyramids. Now, basically, you're saying that they built these great, grandiose things in the middle of the desert, use all these, 20 years, man hours, whatever they say, because we could get into how they constructed the pyramids later. But they say they did all this to build a tomb. And inside the tomb, there's supposed to be a body, but there's no bodies in the tomb. All the bodies are the valleys of the kings. But if you were to look under the Mayan pyramid, you're going to see generations.
Absolutely.
And those generations of Mayans are not Siberian or African, by the way.
Thank you for throwing that in there. Appreciate it. And a lot of people don't know Africa has 200 to 300 pyramids. The Americas has 2,000 to 3,000. The largest pyramid in the world by volume is not in Africa. It's the one on the screen. It's the Cholula Pyramid. And coincidentally, the Spanish built a Catholic church on top of it. And no one knew it was a pyramid until little bits and pieces of it started to be excavated in the early to mid 1900s. So, it's interesting how we still think about Egypt when we talk about pyramids, but there's more pyramids over here. There's older pyramids over here. And if you can touch on this a little bit, isn't it true that the French or whatever European faction that discovered Egypt and the Rosetta Stone and stuff, they did that long after the colonization of the Americas, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So the French were here. So it's like
everything in blue was French, y'all.
Right.
Before the Louisiana
So the
Purchase,
French
1807.
basically colonized the mid part of the country. They came down the St. Lawrence River, right? So they really did get the heartland of America first. And we're talking about from Maine and New York all the way down to New Orleans. And they had some sort of, it's funny how these colonial powers worked. They all had a silent disagreement. They had a gentleman's agreement about what they were going to conquer. So the French really did have more pull in the Americas than the British did during the majority of the colonization of the Americas. The French basically, if you look from Canada all the way down during a time like right now, if you look at that map, you'll notice that the French are in blue, the Spanish are in what's that sand color,
Orange,
and then you have the
brownish,
orange, yeah, and then you have the British in red. That's all the territory the British had. So not that they ever owned any of this territory at the time. Even from the time of Jacques Cartier and the first Frenchmen, they're really just setting up small forts. But it was a military strategy. So the idea here is that is the more they move inland, the more forts they want to set up along the riverways. Because if anything ever if they ever get into trouble, they can just jump on the river and escape. They can escape to the next fort, or they can get out to the ocean if they need to. This is a common strategy they use, and you'll notice that when you look at the settlements, the first French settlements were all forts, and they were all forts along the Mississippi and the St. Lawrence River and the Great Lakes. Absolutely. They say they were for trading posts, but really it was for military reconnaissance as well. More than likely.
So when you guys hear about the British establishing 13 colonies and having treaties and trading with the Indians, you got to understand that's CIA, Black Ops before the war. Before we go to war with Iran, before we bomb them, I bet you we was over there doing some reconnaissance. Okay, that's how we know what targets to hit, et cetera, et cetera. So, all this story of the French and the British coming over here and conducting trade, they were trading, and the trade was very profitable, but it was always a precursor for colonization. Right. Now, the next
and also
thing,
intermarriage, by the way.
Yes.
The French intermarried with the French intermarried at a higher rate than the other people did.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And that's how we eventually get your Creole population and whatnot.
Right.
The French were actually living in the territories, actually mixing with the natives, whereas a lot of the British elite, like the Lords Proprietors who owned those colonies, they never actually stepped foot in the colonies themselves. They sent their vagabonds, their prisoners, their horse from London to fill those colonies. So it's interesting.
And they rarely fought in the wars themselves. Also, they were once again shysters, the keen on the divide and conquer tactic. So they were looking to basically, they butter up an Indian tribe and start giving them stuff just to be friends with them. And then next thing you know, they're playing a game of divide and conquer between this tribe and that tribe. During these wars that these colonists were fighting, 10 to 1, the Indian was dying before the French soldier. Okay. So they would go into battle, it'd probably be 20 Frenchmen, but they'd have 200 Indians at their back. And the Indians were the real warriors. Those guys didn't want nothing to do. If a gun is only one shot, bro. They only had
one shot, and then you got to reload it and put the powder
exactly.
In
you better hit
5 minutes to reload. Come on,
right?
Come on. Yeah, it gets deep. But the next question I have for you, and thank you for properly articulating the concept that America is Egypt. Basically, in layman terms, all of the stories of the Bible took place in the Americas, not in the Middle East or somewhere like mainstream scholars are trying to tell us. But I also came across your Lost at Home series. If you can explain the concept of being lost at home to the audience.
It's the concept that we're from a place across the world that we've never stepped foot on. We've been tricked. So lost at home means us Indigenous Americans are home, although we feel lost because we're disconnected from our history. And that took significant generations of brainwashing, by the way. You know, back in the late 1800s and early 1900s, you couldn't get a quote unquote Negro to call themselves African at all. It happened as a result of the standardized education system. So, you know, a coerced brainwashing across the world for all intents and purposes.
I got you. I got you. And that might be the same answer to the next question, but the next question I had queued up for you is what do you think is the biggest misconception about Black American history? I know it may be the lost at home narrative that really we're from here, but they try to place us across the world. But if there was anything else that you thought was
That all
a
mankind
worthwhile.
doesn't come from Africa. I would say that all mankind doesn't come from Africa, because I still think that within this narrative, people have this idea, well, oh yeah, we're still African. We were just here before anybody else. I'm not saying that at all. I'm not saying that humans came from Africa. Okay. What happens is they've used this African, I don't know what you call it, almost like this African red herring to get the world to blindly adopt Darwinism or the theory of evolution, thus getting into all of these other really evil, demonic ways that are supposed to define creation as opposed to being created. Okay, so we got created, and you know, they put these asinine timelines of millions of years between a fucking guppy turning into a platypus, and a platypus turning into a monkey, and a monkey turning into a smarter monkey, and that monkey turning into a Neanderthal, and a Neanderthal turning into a modern human. It's for one, it's trash, obviously. And you can only really you have to be brainwashed to even once you unwash your brain, you have to be brainwashed to even believe that shit. Because nowhere else in nature does that happen. There's this thing called hybridization, but one species can't have sex and become another species, especially with the same species. If you have sex with a human and procreate, you can only create humans. At no point down the line will a freaking elephant come out of a human. Okay? You didn't two gray wolves didn't have sex forever and make a chihuahua. That's not how nature works.
Come on. Preach, brother, preach.
So, you know, the caveat is there have been and still are things other than human that were able to procreate. All you need to have is certain sort of genetic fitness among being able to procreate first, because you'll be amazed at the things that have been studied that humans can procreate with. But when a human has the procreates with the goat and creates the goat man, right? Can that goat man? First of all, that goat man doesn't have anybody in its generations unless you have another set of goat men in a genetically isolated part of the world that can come together that would even have a chance at genetic fitness. So, you know, once you get into the weeds and the minutia of how genetics work, you understand that it's been all BS from jump. And they do find that these other hominin species, they found them. But the reason that there are other types of humans now is because humans interbred with these non-humans that at some point were genetically isolated enough to create divergent populations that could then interbreed with one another to create another population. Now, the problem with that is you've got to be genetically, or you have to be geographically proximate with the species to do it. The reason that quote unquote Negroes, they misnomer sub-Saharan Negroes, but it's not sub-Saharan because the majority of Negroes that live in sub-Saharan Africa all have Neanderthal DNA. It's only that pocket in West Africa that they say all the slaves in America came from that we know now is a lie. Okay, we know that the only way that DNA can even survive and be able to procreate and create another species is if it was genetically isolated. And of course, the isolation would be across the ocean in the Americas. That's how that works.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad that you touched on that, because a lot of people have the misconception that when we say we're indigenous to America, we're just saying, oh yeah, life started in Africa, but we've been here before everybody else. No,
we're not saying that at
all. Yeah. And a lot of you guys have to watch out for the Pan-African grift, because the Pan-Africans are updating their scheme. First, it was Black folks aren't indigenous. We all got shipped here as West African
Yeah.
slaves. Then we showed our genealogy. Then we showed irrefutable proof. Then the evidence was undeniable. Then they said, okay, look. Black people were here indigenous before Columbus, but really, Mansa Musa's cousin Abba Bakari took some ships over here one day, and we all came from the Mali Empire 2 billion years ago. Okay. All right.
Yeah, man. And the problem with that is, and once again, our people have been brainwashed by this false, grandiose African history that never happened. Okay. For one, you couldn't be genetically Egyptian from where they say Egypt is. Okay. That's mostly a Caucasian area. Okay. Caucasian with got a little black in there. West Africa doesn't have any civilizational footprint past about maybe 2000 BC. So I think, and what happens is once you start studying history on a certain level, and you get past like the surface, where you actually have to get deeper, and then you start looking at anthropology, right? You got to start looking at the oldest bodies, the oldest bones exhumed from the ground in those areas in Africa. Let's say West Africa, that pocket where they say the original man came from. No, that's where the original monkey came from. That's all they found in the ground. They don't find any half man, half monkey, semi-diverged species. They find non-humans. Okay.
And that's a good point, because if we really evolved from monkeys, then we should find archaeological remains during that evolution. We should find some kind of hybrid. We should find some monkey that got some human hands, and then a monkey that got a human face with the rest of the blood. Like, we should see a natural progression of that, but
Right.
we don't. And a lot of people, when they hear about this out of Africa theory, they don't realize it was spearheaded by racist, eugenicists, anthropologists, Charles Darwin. They hoodwinked us so bad in school that they don't even tell you the full title of his book. It wasn't called The Theory of Evolution. It was called The Theory of Evolution and God's Favored Races. He was basically using these theories to say that Caucasoids are more superior and they should rule the world, and we're all subordinate. And these pangoofies and the rest of people are running around quoting eugenicists and anthropologists. The same people who in the 1900s on some Django shit will pull out a skeleton and say, look at your skull shape. That means you should be a slave. Nana, nana, boo, boo. These same folks say we all came from Africa as slaves. Come on.
Yes. I mean, the epitome of ironic hilarity is watching like a very pro-black Pan-African try to defend the Africa theory, and they have to say, well, what about Homo habilis? Like, oh shit, bro. you talk about your monkey roots. Okay, all right. Africa is the birth. It's the birthplace of mankind. Okay, all right. What kind of man?
I ask them all the time when they say that. Oh, Africa's the cradle of civilization. Africa's the motherland. Why don't you want to live in the motherland? Why don't you want to live in the cradle of? Why did everybody from the Eastern Hemisphere, as soon as they found a way back, everybody and their mama want to come to the Americas? The Chinese want to come to vacation. The descendants of the European colonizers came and don't want to go back to Europe. It's something weird about this land. I mean, De Soto's going all through the Southeast looking for El Dorado, the lost city of gold, looking for the fountain of youth in the Americas. Why weren't the colonizers looking for the fountain of youth in Africa? I don't know.
America is the gem of the world. As far as our natural resources, abundant. We have the most livable, arable land on Earth. We have more precious metals and natural resources than anyone on Earth. We can grow damn near anything here. The only other place they call the Fertile Crescent, by the way. So the Fertile Crescent, the place where all the civilization in Mesopotamia, it's like the size, like if you were just to take like the square mileage and block it out and block out extra space, it wouldn't be the size of South Carolina. It'd be like South Carolina and Georgia, maybe. You see what I'm saying? Like the size of a very small state is the epitome of the beginnings of agriculture. Now imagine that. Imagine that. The first people to invent agriculture were also hunter-gatherers. All right. Okay. Cool story, bro.
And if you guys look at this map, you'll see how large just the United States is compared to Europe. We're not even talking about the entirety of the Americas. We're not even talking about Canada, Central America, South America, the Caribbean, just the US of A. Look how many European countries can fit within our borders. You see why we've always been the gem of the world? And you also got to ask yourself this. I mean, If America is the gem of the world, which is an undeniable fact, then guess who the indigenous people of that land would be? The most influential people of that land, which is us. Ain't nobody trying to dance like a Navajo, sing like a Navajo, play ball like a Navajo. But Black American culture is exported globally, flipped and reversed to the point where people in other countries just call it American culture, not knowing it literally spawns from us. I mean, everything, whether we even talk about modern English, they weren't speaking English like we speak today over there in Europe. Modern English is a twist of indigenous words and lexicons mixed with some of that old English.
Right.
I mean, it's so crazy how 1 + 1 = 2, but we got folks trying to tell us it equals 12. And what I want to do real quick is there's a clip that I want to play for the folks from one of your pieces. If anybody wants to find this video in length, this is an hour-plus long video. The name of this video is Boule Race Bait and Switch. And you guys can find this video on UBTV's YouTube channel. This is how he spells the name of his YouTube. He'll pop right up, about 80,000 plus subscribers. But let's segue to this brief clip to give some folks some more context on what we're talking about, and then we'll be right back.
Quote from Virginia's First Slaves, American Indians. Quote, decades before the first documented evidence of African slavery in Virginia, Virginians referred to Indians as slaves. In the colony's Anglo-Powhatan War of 1622 and 23, official directives mandated Indian slavery. For another example, in 1626, the colonial government granted a captured Indian man to Captain William Claiborne, so Claiborne could test his newly invented restraining device that was designed to make Indians more serviceable to the colonists. Hey man, here goes an Indian for your little torture device. Let's see if it works. We're trying to capture these Indians. In the third Virginia Powhatan War of 1644, the colonists transported many Indian captives on a ship owned by Governor William Berkeley to be sold as slaves in England's West Indies. Just call it the fucking West Indies. In England's West Indies, like there's not other niggas colonizing the Indies. All it really needs to say is, in 1644, the colonists transported many Indian captives to the Caribbean to be sold as slaves to defray the colony wartime expenses. Hey guys, we're gonna give you these slaves for all the ammunition that you send us to fight the Indians, who you guys can do whatever with. Now that we got them, thanks for the weapons, and we'll send you a big load of Indians as repayment. Moreover, over the next 5 years, 28 Indians were specifically identified in colonial deeds and estate inventories as servants or slaves. Everett argues that 6 of these Indians were then sold at the estate sales, and that at least 6 more were unambiguously slaves delivered and sold as merchandise and bequeathed in perpetuity to estate heirs through their last wills. He notes that while 28 Indian slaves might not sound like a large number, but 28 Indian slaves actually exceeded the figure for all Africans living in Virginia at the time. 28 Indian slaves actually exceeded the figure for all Africans living in Virginia at the time. Just to make sure you understand that. And those Africans that they're saying live in Virginia were most likely not African. They were most likely taken from the Caribbean, and they were probably taken from South America or somewhere in the Americas and transported to the Caribbean, including the Carolinas, because as we can see, and as we've gone over, we know their mode of operation. We know their patterns. The colonists engaged in 3 Indian wars from 1610 to 1646, in which enslavement was considered a proper punishment for captives. Virginia also exported some captive Indians, and Everett suggests that this proves that there is an existing external market for Indian slaves in other countries and the Caribbean. Of course, he claims, I also want to say this, that in addition to the Caribbean, we also can see that these Indian slaves were taken where? To Europe, specifically England, to be sold as slaves. He claims that the market to sell Indians as slaves could have added a financial incentive in addition to other motives for colonial Indian wars. Numerous Virginia Indians were enslaved and exported during the Third Anglo-Powhatan War in 1644 to 1646. Historian Jane Guild asserts that the 1655 Act also prevented colonists from treating Indian children as slaves, even if they were being held as colonial hostages. Notably, she also states that this act is the first use of the word slave in any Virginian legislation. It is interesting and illuminating that the first appearance of the word slave in a Virginian law concerned Indians. Quote, in its legislative session in October of 1670, the Virginia General Assembly addressed the status of non-Christian servants who had been imported to Virginia by sea and whether they were servants or slaves. The legislature enacted Act 12 and clarified that they were slaves. They shall be slaves for their lives. Everett alleges that this act was enacted in response to questions whether Indians were slaves and because of ongoing negotiations concerning the regulation of Indian enslavement. This act authorized and encouraged the importation of servants/slaves by sea from outside of the colony of Virginia so that Indians would become legally lifelong slaves. As might be expected, this policy greatly increased intercontinental and long-range Indian slave trading involving Virginia and the Virginians. So we can see here they're setting up the fuckery. If you arrive by sea to Virginia, then you are to be a lifelong slave. So if you were to identify with a person who arrives by sea, you would be a lifelong slave. So here, in a sense, we can see the mind games that they're playing with the terminology of slaves, Indians, and who may or may not be considered a slave. Virginian trade outside of the colony did increase, and human captives seemed to be the primary commodity imported into Virginia. In 1671, Virginians began leading trading expeditions to the tribal nations southwest of Virginia. In 1673, a Virginian established trade relations with the Cherokees southwest of Virginia. In 1674, Carolina traders from Charleston, established trade relations with the Westo Indians in that colony and became the conduit for trade between the Westo Nation and the Virginians. Arms and ammunition were delivered to the Westos in exchange for deerskins, furs, and young Indian slaves. A Virginia legislature enacted a law regarding Indian slaves as a distinct group. Thereafter, this historian asserts the legislature addressed the single slave category of Negroes and other slaves in many different statutes. Another historian makes an important point about the 1682 Act. According to Professor Edmund Morgan, that act resulted in the importation to Virginia of far more Indian slaves than has usually been recognized. I want to make this clear to you. This is saying that if a slave was captured somewhere else in the Americas, for example, the Carolinas or Georgia or even New York or anywhere else, even the Caribbean, once they arrived to Virginia by sea, they were essentially slaves for life. It didn't matter where they came from. In fact, Morgan states that in just Henrico County alone, located just north of Richmond today, and in just the year 1683, 8,433 Indian children slaves aged 4 to 18 were registered at the county court. The same year, no black children were registered. 8,433 Indian children slaves aged 4 to 18 were registered at the county court.
Come on, hey. I try to tell people all the time, do some of us have ancestors that were enslaved? Absolutely. That don't mean they came from no Africa.
Right.
As a genealogist, I've actually found some clients of mine whose ancestors were enslaved. I've actually found the shipping manifest. I got one client, I played a little game with him. I said, hey, guess where your ancestor was shipped as a slave from and where they were shipped to. Naturally, they guessed they were shipped from West Africa to like Virginia or something. Nope. They were shipped from Savannah, Georgia to Charleston, South Carolina.
Yep. That's how they do it.
I got another client. I asked him the same thing. Hey, where do you think your enslaved ancestor was shipped from? I don't know, Mike, like the Caribbean to like the colonies. Nope, they were shipped from Charleston, South Carolina down to Florida. Come on, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
But this brings me to another question that I have for you. Why do you think that this African-only narrative is so dominant? I mean, how much of a role do you think it plays us having the Boule class, which if you guys ever need any history on the Boule, again, go to UBTV. He has a whole breakdown on the Boule, Jesse Jackson included, RIP. But how much of an influence do you think the Boule was versus how much do you think it's just like that Nazi propaganda notion of repeat a lie enough times and it becomes the truth? I mean, what do you think was the main catalyst for this being accepted as the mainstream origin of Black America?
I'm gonna agree with the Boule statement. Not necessarily Boule because they weren't created until the 1900s, but it was the prominent Negroes. It was the well-educated Negroes, the Negroes who were most of the time free people of color. Most of the time they were mulattoes who could pass for whites. These were the first people who actually get to create the Black history that we know, the Black American history. So basically, once you get, they created a bougie class of, the upper Negrostocracy, and they get to call the shots on Black history. And then what you do is you feed them information. They write books, and it becomes history. Well, and so what happens is over time, it becomes ingrained that, oh, okay, these are civil rights activists, all the people who we've been, when you go back, you start looking at the Frederick Douglasses, who, by the way, it's interesting. Frederick Douglass did not believe we were from Africa, although I do remember in one of his works talking about being in the jungles of Africa. So I thought that was weird. It was like when Frederick Douglass became a more independent thinker, he actually pushed back against Africa and the American Colonization Society, and the Freemasons for that matter. But I do remember in some of his earlier work, he did mention being in the jungles of Africa or describing it as a place where his ancestors came from. But with that being said, because I generally, as far as Frederick Douglass goes, I generally have some level of respect for his work. Right, I'm not willing to throw all of Frederick Douglass.
Out of all the Boule people, Frederick Douglass, he's kind of on the fence for me as well, where it seems like he did have a bit of an evolution later in his life. I do know he spoke out vehemently against the colonization schemes and Abraham Lincoln trying to get us to freely immigrate to another country. And, he spoke about this being our native land and why would we want to go back to the wilds of Africa? But you're right. In his earlier years, it seemed like he might have been, reinforcing the African notion.
And I think that was all influence. It wasn't because it's not because it was natural. It didn't come from his people. It didn't come from anybody around him. That's when you know that there is a secret hand that starts to influence the quote unquote, the upper crust of the Black historian or the early Black thought. Was they were being, in probably most cases, just paid to talk about Africa. And Africa at some point was probably just a vague place, could have been anywhere where their ancestors were from, because all they know is they were taken from one place to another place. You see what I'm saying? If you don't have the worldly knowledge, somebody could just say, I'm from Africa, or you say you're from Africa, and that shit ain't really nothing but fucking Mississippi. You see what I'm saying? So if once you get put on a boat and taken from this long place to another place, you don't know. But with all that being said, upper crust Negroes and the quote unquote elite Negroes and the first pastors, especially like Richard Allen, the African Methodist Episcopal Church. You have Prince Hall, who created the African Lodge, although he wasn't African at all. So these are things that the prominent Negro got to push on the normal Negro.
Absolutely. And guys, this is a tale as old as time. For those of you that are familiar with my work, I descend from the previous chief of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I'm myself a citizen of the Creek Nation, and knowing the history of our tribe, it actually gets a little deep because just like we have a more modern Black American Boule class, some of them with a white parent, some of them mulatto, just fair skin, some of them even white passing, we have the same exact thing within the Creek Nation. We would literally have Scottish Irish traders intermarrying with Creek women since the 1500s, and they create this half-breed class that would go on to be the ones to sign the fraudulent treaties and get us taken off of our land. One of the biggest ones, the most infamous one within our tribe would be William McIntosh. William McIntosh had a Scottish-Irish father. His mother was a Creek Indian, and he's the one that signed the treaty that got us walking the Trail of Tears. He also sided with the Confederacy. He also had a plantation. He also had slaves, just like his daddy taught him how to do. And when our tribe found out that this half-breed sellout got us walking the Trail of Tears, gave all of our land to the U.S. government, guess what we did? Some of the members of the Creek Nation went to his plantation, burnt it to the ground, and assassinated him. Not only that, but this is how deep it goes. Guess who his cousin was? George Troup, the governor of Georgia.
Right.
So the governor
right, okay.
of Georgia is cousins to a half-breed Creek Indian who's signing the treaties and getting them to walk the Trail of Tears. So when we fast forward to the 1900s and we got these, some biracial, some mulatto, some just Boule, you see where this comes from. This is kind of like part of the global colonial playbook, whether it's India or Hindustan, whether they didn't really do it so much in Africa, but Hindustan, other parts of the world, they'll kind of create these intermediary caste demographics that will kind of manage the rest of them. And hey, we're going to give these points the bullet. We're going to give these folks the bullet points. We want the Negroes to do this. We want them to do that. And you guys are going to be our agent provocateurs, if you will. So, you know, it's great that you touched on that. And it's wild that you mentioned just having, you know, loose notions of being sent from Africa somewhere, but who knows if it was Africa? It could have been another part of the Americas, right? Well, I got to bring up something real quick, and I wasn't even gonna bring this up, but I've got to. I do live call-in shows all the time where people try to debate me on this history and stuff. And we had a Pan-African call-in one day, and he tried to tell me, no, you know, our ancestors did say they came from Africa, da 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 da. And when I asked him for some receipts, when I asked him to cite some sources, he cited WPA slave narratives. Are you familiar with those narratives? Are you familiar with that archive?
I'm slave WPA slave narratives.
WPA slave narratives. Yep. What the WPA slave narratives are is during the Great Depression, 1936 to 1938, the federal government got these white folks to go around to the Black Belt and pay for and coerce some of these former plantation slaves for interviews. And you can already think in Jim Crow era, Great Depression era, Black folks getting lynched. This white person comes and wants an interview from you. Some of these some of these Black former plantation slaves actually thought these folks were government agents, even though they weren't. They were just doing this humanities project, right? And what they were wanting is they were wanting interviews that tied the slaves back to Africa, because they were trying to craft this narrative of, you know, our ancestors got shipped here from West Africa, da 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 da. Let's read a few of these slave narratives, and let's see if what you said a moment ago doesn't ring true about these loose, you know, notions that aren't really backed by anything. Check this out, y'all. And I'm gonna move my screen share around real quick so that you guys can actually see this as big as possible. I want you to be able to read along with us. Give me just a second. If anybody wants to look these up, just type in WPA West African slave narratives. It'll pop right up for you. But check this out. Let's start with the first one. It says over 2,300 former slaves were interviewed during the Great Depression by members of the Federal Writers Project, a New Deal agency for the Works Progress Administration. That's what WPA stands for. Now let's read this first narrative. My mother was Harriet David, and she was born in Virginia. I don't know who my father was. My grandmother was captured in Africa when she was a little girl. A big boat was down at the edge of a bay, and the people was all excited about it, and some of the bravest went up pretty close to look at it. The men on the boat told them to come on board and they could have the pretty red handkerchiefs, red and blue beads, and big rings. A lot of them went on board and the ship sailed away with them. My grandmother never saw any of her folks again. Now, before we give any commentary, let's just read through a few of these and see if we see any running themes. My grandmother was captured in Africa. Traders came there in a big boat, and they had all sorts of purty gewgaws, red handkerchiefs, dress goods, beads, bells, and trinkets in bright colors. They would pull up to the shore and entice the colored folks onto the boat to see the pretty things. Before the darkies realized it, they would be out from the shore. That's the way she was captured. 15 to 25 would pay them for the trip as they all brought good prices. Another one. Ma lived to be 103 years old. Pa died in 1905 and was 105 years old. I used to set up on grandma's lap and she told me about how they used to catch people in Africa. They herded them up like cattle and put them in stalls and brought them on the ship and sold them. She said some that they captured, they left bound till they would come back, and sometimes they never went back to get them. They died. They had room in the stalls on the boat to sit down or lie down. They put several together, put the men to themselves and the women to themselves. When they sold grandma and grandpa at a fishing dock in Newport, Virginia, they had their feet bound down and their hands crossed up on a platform. They sold grandma's daughter to somebody in Texas. She cried and begged to let them be together. They didn't pay no attention to her. She couldn't talk, but she made them know she didn't want to be parted. 6 years after slavery, they got together. Hold up, another one. My father's name was George, and my mother's name was Nellie. My father was born in Africa. Him and two of his brothers and one sister was stole and brought to Savannah, Georgia, and sold. They was chillin' of a chief of the Kaochi tribe. The way they was stole, they was asked to dance on a ship which some white men had. And my aunt said that early in the morning, when they found they was away from the land, all they could see was water all around. And yes, guys, before we even provide commentary, you can see these are extremely short accounts. My father's name was Eli Jones and my mammy was Jessie. They was captured in Africa and brought to this country whilst they were still young folks. And my father was pretty hard to realize he was a slave because he done what he wanted back in Africa. The fun was on Saturday night when Mass allowed us to dance. There was lots of banjo picking and tin pan beating and dancing, and everybody would talk about how they lived in Africa and done what they wanted. Oh, it gets wilder. My grandma and grandpa came here on a steamboat. We don't even have to tell you the year steamboats were created, okay? My grandma and grandpa came here on a steamboat. The man come to Africa and say, man and woman, does you want a job? So they gets on the boat and then he has the advantage. Yeah, y'all, steamboats were going to Africa and getting slaves, apparently. Another one. I had always been told, here we go. I had always been told from the time I was a small child that I was a Negro of African stock, that it was no disgrace to be a Negro had it not been for the white folks who brought us over here from Africa as slaves. We would never have been here and would have been much better off. Okay, here's one of the last ones, okay? Most of the time, there was more than 300 slaves on the plantation. The oldest ones come right from Africa. My grandmother was one of them, a savage in Africa, a slave in America. Mammy told me, over there, all the natives dressed naked and lived on fruits and nuts. They never seen white men's. One day, a big ship stopped off the shore, and the natives hid in the brush along the beach. Grandmother was there. The shipmen sent a little boat to the shore and scattered some bright things and trinkets on the beach. The natives were curious. Grandmother said everybody made a rush for them things soon as the boat left. The trinkets were fewer than the people's. Next day, the white folks scattered some more. There was another scramble. The natives was feeling less scared, and the next day, some of them walked up the gangplank to get things off the plank and off the deck. The deck was covered with things like they found on the beach. 200 to 300 slaves on the ship. When they feel it move, they rushed to the side, but the plank was gone, just dropped in the water when the ship moved away. Folks on the beach started crying and shouting. The ones on the boat was wild with fear. Grandmother was one of them who got fooled, and she said the last thing she seen of that place was the natives running up and down the beach, waving their arms and shouting like they was mad. The boatmen came up from below where they was hiding and drove the slaves down to the bottom and keep them quiet with whips and clubs. The slaves landed at Charleston. The town folks was mighty mad because the blacks was driven through the streets without any clothes and drove off the boatmen after the slaves was sold on the market. Most of that load was sold to the Brown plantation in Alabama. Grandmother was one of the bunch. What do you think about these interviews, Uvia? Is there anything that stands out to you?
Well, I see a lot of people are subject to trickery. Hey guys, handkerchiefs? They got some handkerchiefs on the boat.
Red handkerchiefs. That's all I take.
Hey, listen, man. And this is, I mean, that what I'm saying is it's okay, man. We were all lied to. Okay, I get it. We get it. Don't listen, man. Do not hold on. Do you hear how ridiculous this is? And when you think about it, the more you think about it, you know how freaking ridiculous. First of all, a steamboat. It's kind of like the Chris Rock joke, like, nigga, where did you learn octagon? Like, nigga, you don't know. What do you know what a steamboat is, bro? Shut up. You saw it on the river. You didn't take a steamboat. Like, okay. Beyond
Steamboats
that,
were not invented until after the transatlantic slave trade, right?
But the problem, I mean, okay, obviously the stories are all fabricated, just making up stuff, not even like good details, right? Like, you know, typically when some people share accounts of their past family history, there'll be like some authentic details that we didn't get any of those in these, you know, this project of slave narratives. It was just like, hey, you know, one day I was all talking about how we done what we liked in Africa. We used to dance. And you see what I'm saying? So
no African country named, no tribe named. It's just Africa. Grandma came from Africa. I was told grandmummy was a savage. And I mean, clearly these folks were conditioned with propaganda by their plantation owners and overseers during slavery. And now they're regurgitating it because they have a natural fear for white folks. And here comes some official looking white folks saying that they need a story about how their ancestors came from Africa. Yeah. Handkerchiefs, beads. Guys, Africans actually did get shipped to the Americas, not in the large numbers they claim, but there were Africans who had slave networks with European business partners, and they were giving them slaves and stuff. Those narratives is not how the majority of Africans became slaves of Europeans. They were captured by another African faction and then marched sometimes months to the coast to then be sold to Europeans. So why is it that
and you know what? The same thing happened over here too.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the same thing happened here too.
But not one of those narratives said that. Not one of the narratives said, we got captured by a rival tribe. They sent us on a long walk. We saw some boats. We got pushed on the boats. Apparently, the Europeans just went to Africa with hella red handkerchiefs and was like, we about to get to the bag.
Yo. Hey, listen, all you got to do is cruise the coastline with some handkerchiefs, some beads, little doilies and shit. Hey, them niggas go crazy for that. Hey, just pull up and start dangling them over the edge. Like, what are we doing, bro? And yo, we saw them handkerchiefs, man. I said, man, we can get 50 goats with one of them handkerchiefs right there.
Yeah, right. Don't you know? You can get you some slaves and populate the colonies just for the low cost of some red cloth. I mean, and guys, here's an example of an actual factual slave narrative. Okay, let's see if we see any difference now. We're gonna hear from a man named Oluda Ikwano. You can already tell that there's gonna be some authentic shit. Okay, he was captured with his
when
sister.
You said it, I was like, oh no.
Oluda Ikwano. Okay, Oluda Ikwano was captured with his sisters by slave traders in West Africa, present-day Nigeria, in the mid-1750s when he was about 11 years old. He says, generally, when the grown people in the neighborhood were gone far in the fields to labor, the children assembled together in some of their neighbors' premises to play. And commonly, some of us used to get up a tree to look out for an assailant or kidnapper that might come upon us, for they sometimes took those opportunities of our parents' absence to attack and carry off as many as they could seize. One day, as I was watching at the top of a tree in our yard, I saw one of those people come into the yard of our next neighborhood near me to kidnap. There being many stout young people in the group, immediately on this, I gave the alarm of the rogue, and he was surrounded by the stoutest of them, who entangled him with cords so that he could not escape till some of the grown people came and secured him. But alas, ere long it was my fate to be thus attacked and to be carried off when none of the grown people were nigh. One day, when all of our people were gone out to their works as usual, and only I and my dear sister were left to mind the house, 2 men and a woman got over our walls, and in a moment seized us both. Without giving us time to cry out or make resistance, they stopped our mouths and ran us off into the nearest woods. Here they tied our hands and continued to carry us as far as they could. Thus I continued to travel, sometimes by land, sometimes by water, through different countries and various nations in West Africa, till at the end of 6 or 7 months after I had been kidnapped, I arrived at the sea coast. The first object which saluted my eyes when I arrived on the coast was the sea and a slave ship, which was then riding an anchor and waiting for its cargo. These filled me with astonishment, which was soon converted into terror when I was carried on board. I was immediately handled and tossed up to see if I were sound by some of the crew, and I was now persuaded that I had gotten into the world of bad spirits, and that they were going to kill me. Their complexions were too different from ours. Their long hair and the language they spoke, which was very different from any I had ever heard, united me to confirm in this belief. Indeed, such there were horrors of my views and fears at the moment that if 10,000 worlds had been my own, I would have freely parted with them all to have exchanged my condition with that of the meanest slave in my own country. Let's stop there. Guys, that's what an actual slave narrative sounds like. Being captured by his fellow warring African neighbors, marched several months to the coast, slave boat waiting. That sounds way different than the red handkerchief doodads on the beach story, right?
I mean, that's one articulate slave. We'll say that.
Yeah. Well, you guys can actually look up Olude Iquano. He actually ended up being taken to like Europe at some point and educated and got his freedom and stuff. So he became a little,
I feel like somebody had told me. I feel like somebody told me about him, and they said that he was a Negro from South Carolina, Equiano.
Oh shit! Hey,
yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised.
That's what I heard. I heard Equiano was a nigga from South Carolina. That's what I heard.
If y'all look up his Wikipedia page, because we all know Wikipedia is accurate, right? They claim that he's a writer and an abolitionist. According to his memoir, he was from the village of Isaka in southern Nigeria. He was enslaved as a child in West Africa, where he was then shipped to the Caribbean and sold to a Royal Navy officer. He was sold twice more before purchasing his freedom in 1766. As a freedman in London, he supported the British abolitionist movement and became a leading figure in 1780s. So again, guys, we know for a fact he was in the Caribbean.
This nigga's using words like assailant. Like, he said the assailant. This nigga said my astonishment. All right, nigga. Okay.
But even still, if we take his narrative with more than a grain of salt, that's at least more like if you're gonna trick us, at least do a good job like that. At least make it a believable story.
Right? Yeah. I mean,
come on, it gets deep.
I still don't believe that nigga.
As soon as I said,
I don't believe that shit.
Iquano, he said, like a Nigerian Spanish. Come on, y'all.
I feel you though. I mean, it was an articulate memoir.
Very articulate. Hey,
yeah.
It's at least better than red handkerchiefs and beads. That's all I'm saying.
That shit is crazy. Like imagine like at least Equiano put a little story together, had a plot.
Yeah.
Like, we had to walk, we had to do this. This nigga just said we were standing by the boats one day. First of all, we all on the coast. We didn't know where inland. We all on the coast. Hey, what they got on that boat? They dangling handkerchiefs and beads, nigga. Yeah. We had to get. Next thing you know, we out in the middle of the water. Good Lord, bro. Like, listen, I know our people are really, we got some special needs out there with our people, but we not that slow, bro. We not that slow. We are a skeptical bunch.
But to give some empathy, 1930s, Jim Crow, Great Depression era, former plantation slaves. White folks come, they want them to spin a tale. Some of them was actually paying the former slaves for interviews and stuff. So, hey, I think that they did what they felt they needed to do to survive another day in the Jim Crow South.
They was getting a buck. Like, nigga, you could probably get niggas to lie about. First of all, other people don't get like, how much you finna pay me to say what on camera?
What?
Oh, all right. Okay.
Red handkerchiefs, beads, Africa. I don't need to name a country or tribe or anything. Just Africa? Okay. A steamboat? Okay, yeah, a steamboat.
Yeah, shit.
But hey, I've got another question for you. I'm sure you may or may not have noticed. I mean, I know you do more pre-recorded content versus live content, but you still may get this in your comment section where there's just people who get triggered by this topic. Like as soon as, I mean, some people will go down the rabbit hole of us being Hebrew Israelites and Moors and all this stuff, but as soon as we start talking about being indigenous to America and not being from Africa, it seems to trigger some folks. Why do you think it triggers people so bad?
You know, they still on the Pan-African Kool-Aid. I don't know what else it would be. I think, and it was a point I was making earlier, you know, maybe they feel like, oh, you're trying to what's the word? You're trying to disregard everything I've learned about our history and tell me I'm wrong about our history. So I think a lot of people take that personal, especially like if they've been taught by people they respect. Now it's like fighting words, like, nigga, my daddy told me we was from Africa, nigga. Fuck you, boy. You know what I'm saying? Like they real off that. They really get mad off that. You know what I mean?
My daddy used to barbecue in the backyard with a kufi and a dashiki on. What you gonna tell me?
Yeah, I know. Exactly. We from Nigeria. First of all, I did my 23andMe, and it says we from Nigeria.
Yeah. If I'm native, why it only say I'm 1% native, huh?
Well, yeah, that's DNA. That's blood right there. That's truth right there. What? Now, if you swabbed your dog, he'd be West African too, but that's another topic for another day.
Hey, I knew a white girl that swabbed, and it said she was like 20% Nigerian. I know identical twins that swabbed, and it said that they came from different countries altogether, and they identical twins. I mean, yeah. I mean, people, you know, I mean, it's been a long running gag now for some years where people just swab their pets, and their pets read wherever Ashkenazi Jew, they're German, they're Polish, and all they're really doing is using people's records and cross-referencing with their pre-recorded data. Yeah, no, absolutely. And speaking of data, speaking of pre-recorded data, something comes to mind. I think you had a clip not too long ago. I think I can find it here somewhere, where they're trying to discuss the alleged amount of Africans that are shipped into the Caribbean. Right?
Yeah.
We're supposed to be told, oh, so many Africans were shipped into the Caribbean. And if you're from Haiti, if you're from Jamaica, if you're from Puerto Rico, you're just exclusively African heritage. But of course, that discounts the longstanding history of indigenous people taken from the mainland and sent to the West Indies, as they called it. But let me play this quick clip from you, and then we'll come right back. And guys, we will be wrapping up the broadcast sooner than later. So if you guys have any questions you'd like me to ask UBTV, I know there's going to be a lot of questions. So if you send us super chat, you'll get preference. But I'll try to get to everybody's questions if we can. But let's go ahead and check out another gem that this brother gave us. If you guys want to watch this video in length, it's called Boule, the Haitian Hoax.
And yes, I did take it upon myself to scour the entire database. So one of the things I did for research purposes was filter the fields. I clicked on the location of disembarkation. So where did all the slaves get off? So I went to the major ports in Haiti. And I literally went through all the fields and added them up. Actually, after a while, I stopped adding. I could just start estimating. Okay, this is how many, this is how many, this is how many, this is how many. And we'll investigate the inflation of these numbers, the numbers that they say these people were on ships, 600, 500, 400. When you look up the highest capacity slave ship, the numbers come back far less than that. They'll say that this ship once had 500 people. That one time, that one ship. So yes, those numbers are also inflated. But I added all of the numbers of the slaves that were said to disembark in locations like Port-au-Prince, in which I counted roughly about 20,000 slaves, and we can double that and say, let's just say there was 40,000 slaves. And then I counted Cape Français or Cape Haitian. This is where the largest amount of slaves in Haiti were shipped to. according to the manifest, according to the database. This is where the largest shipment came into. It wasn't Port-au-Prince. It was Cape Haitian or Cape Francais. Now, my estimate based off these numbers, and I went through and counted a couple of pages, but it was so many pages, I took an average of the pages and I inflated them even more. There were as many as 130,000 between the years of 1714 and 1791. After that point, the slave trade pretty much dies off on the island. And of course, that's leading up into the Haitian Revolution. And we're setting the stage for the Haitian Revolution because we can see exactly how many people actually made it from Africa versus how many people they say were there. So if they say that there were nearly 500,000 people and most of those, 90% of those being slaves, of those slaves, how many were actually African? Well, if you take Cape Francais and you take Port-au-Prince and you take Les Cayes, three of the biggest ports, you get nothing close to 400,000. You might be able to get half as much. You could also say that maybe other slaves were smuggled in from Africa, mind you, using different methods. But that still doesn't equal 400,000. That as I go through these ships and I go through each one of these ships in the database, I can clearly see that these numbers have been embellished and inflated. All of these numbers are lies. And the thing that I found most interesting is that when I'm looking at the database of these overcrowded ships with a capacity unheard of in maritime history, when I'm looking at these numbers, I notice one common denominator. Jean Matas. Apparently, Jean Matas in 1975 compiled the greatest database of French slave trade ever heard of. One thing I thought was super ironic, when I started to try to research Jean Matas, there's nothing out there on him. He created the most comprehensive slave database of the French colonial world. But there's no information about him. Now, apparently he wrote this in 1975. Now, where he got these numbers for these ships, one could only imagine. You know what else I find ironic? Is that Jean Matas lived a relatively short life. He did not even make it to see the age of 35. Yet he is quoted in the database thousands of times. He is the only source of his own information. A man who died in 1975. And this is one of the contentions Philip D. Curtin had with the overall embellishment of the number in general. So even when I look at the database and I'm looking at all of these exacerbated numbers, Jean Matas is the common denominator. He found records for thousands upon thousands of French vessels. He knew the cargo of some, he didn't know the cargo of others. But I do know one thing, a significant portion of the vessels that are listed under his citations could not have sailed with the amount of slaves that is listed in the database. These numbers are clearly false.
Wait a minute, though.
Yet they are.
Wait a minute. They say it's all true, though. They say all these African slaves got shipped over here. Why? Because some hustling ass Africans started them some slave dungeon tourist traps, right? We got slave dungeon tourism over there in Africa. If you ever want to check it out, you know that there's an African who can definitely sell you a slave castle. And you know, guys, real quick, before we bring UB back up, let me play another piece of the same video that really goes into those quote unquote slave castles. Yeah, I know some of our cousins may have fallen for the Pan-African okie doke and they went over there to Ghana and stuff on some year of return just to get scammed by some Africans. But let's take a quick look.
The French presence on the island didn't show face until the late 1600s. After making several attempts along with the English, they won the Pirates of the Caribbean first act by taking advantage of Spain's overseas vulnerability due to their ongoing conflicts with the Dutch. The French slid in there, commandeering the fertile western third of the island. By 1700, the French were gradually building an empire, and the Spanish were going broke. In 1697, the Spanish signed the Treaty of Ryswick, officially recognizing the French claim. They founded Cap Français, or Cape Haitian, in 1711. Port-au-Paix was previously occupied by filibusters since the 1660s, who established a militarized foothold on the island by way of Tortuga, a small island just to the north of the Haitian mainland. Their southern port, Les Cayes, was founded in 1726, and on the western shore, Port-au-Prince was founded in 1749. From 1750 to 1770, Port-au-Prince had been wrecked multiple times by a series of earthquakes and tsunamis. Prior to this point, Saint-Domingue, the French third of the island, wasn't necessarily thriving, but things were about to change with the inception of the French Indian War. The French had not held many slaves on the island, as their numbers were small. Some estimates say as many as 15,000, but even that figure is most likely a stretch, considering the extremely small numbers of French on the island at the time. Port-au-Prince, being their largest city, didn't reach over 10,000 people until after the year 1750. And yet, certain choice historians have taken it upon themselves to dramatically inflate the population statistics of colonial Haiti. Case in point, Michel Laguerre, or however you say this nigga's name, who said that there were over 250,000 slaves in Haiti by 1755, even though that number would be more than the entire population of Haiti is said to have prior to the 1780s by official record. Additionally, this number cannot be substantiated anywhere on the official colonial slave record. And with all due disrespect to this Aristocoon, there are plenty of other people who have embellished this number even more. I've seen numbers saying that by 1750, there were already 500,000 enslaved Africans on the island. That's right. Quote from the Daily Mail: historians claim Obama's door of no return, which he visited to highlight the evils of slavery, is a scam and was actually used as a garbage dump. Oh, well, this is interesting. President Obama and his family visited Gorée Island outside of Dakar. Historians doubt the role of the island in the slave trade. University of Chicago professor said, there are literally no historians who believe the slave house is what they're claiming it to be. Nelson Mandela, Pope John Paul II, and former U.S. Presidents Bill Clinton and George W. Bush have also visited the island. When President Barack Obama visited the door of no return on a Senegalese island on Thursday, he believed he was looking at where Africans were shipped across the Atlantic into slavery. But not all may be as it first seemed. Historians claim that the entrance of Slave House on Goree Island, where Obama posed for a photo opportunity, was most likely only used for disposing of garbage. As reported by the Telegraph, Professor Ralph Austin of the University of Chicago said, there are literally no historians who believe the slave house is what they're claiming it to be.
Damn. So UB, I gotta ask you, do you think that we hear from Africans that Africa's the motherland and our ancestors came from Africa simply because of the financial, schemes, for lack of better words, year of return Ghana scheme, the Dory Castle scheme, or do you think that there's other reasons why they perpetrate that myth as well?
Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's an industry now. And the people, how many African American professors of history are there across all universities? And these people are touted as the purveyors of Black history. So yeah, for sure. There's obviously there's a social incentive because people look at you like you know what you're talking about. You can get platforms to speak to, large audiences. You get paid well, all to perpetuate a lie. So yeah, there's definitely some sort of financial incentive behind it. There's an entire Africa industry, right? There is an entire museum in Washington, D.C. dedicated to the hoax.
That's deep. And you know what? It kind of reminds me of the Caribbean. The Caribbean, the different Caribbean countries modern day, they will collude with one another and form these alliances to bolster tourism because a lot of their nations rely on tourism. And in that same vein, I would say the Africans are making a hefty bag with all these Black American expats or all these Pan-Africans doing the Egypt tours and the Ghana tours. So,
they're making big money off Egypt and the West African, the Ghanas, the Liberias, the Nigerias. Yeah, they're making good money too. Laughing in your face and behind your back. Just ha 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 ha. You know what I mean? Like it's sick, bro. And speaking of sick, so when they started the American Colonialization Society, where they were attempting to send to repatriate Africa with the niggas that were supposedly taken, the quote unquote free Africans that they were going to let be free. They couldn't be free in America. They could go back to Africa. But when they get to Africa, they weren't immune to any of the diseases. They all died. Now, if they were going back to their motherland, where they're originally from, why did all the people die? Well, I say all the people, like the majority. They didn't all die, but like 60, 70% of them died. When they had these startup colonies in Sierra Leone and Liberia, especially, Black people immediately wanted to leave. If they didn't die.
And you know what?
It's in the first year, by the way.
And shout out to one of my moderators, Empress. This is divine timing because as you talk about this, Liberia and whatnot, this reminds me of a clip that Empress just sent to me the other day. I forget the name of the movie, but this is a very, very telling scene of this movie. Check this out.
Those people in Liberia, they don't want us. Just because our skin is the same, it don't make us the same. We're not Africans. Well, what are you then? I'm an American. Mary Jane, what happened to you over there?
And actually, the name of the movie is The Gray House. I never seen it, but I just thought that was an interesting clip because some Pan-Africans really do get their kind of Negro wake-up call when they go over there and become a tourist in Africa, because the locals who aren't getting money from the tourism scam, they'll call you white boy, they'll call you Yankee Akatas, they'll be like, well, you guys don't come from us. There's content creators who've gone to Africa and asked them straight up, West Africa specifically, like, hey, do you have any oral tradition of like members of your tribe being kidnapped and like sold to white folks or anything? They're like, no, we don't know nothing. We don't got no history of that. So
like, you still believe that?
Yeah, like you niggas,
Like, this ain't Santa Claus no more, bro.
Come on. We do know that certain African nations did trade slaves and sell them to Europeans. Funny how they've never came out and apologized for that. And if we're really supposed to come from West Africans like that, and that's the true history and stuff, like, damn, not one of them wanted to get on a boat and go looking for their family or nothing. It's just the huge kingdoms over in Africa, and nobody was like, hey, let's get an armada together and go looking for those folks. I mean, some of y'all really think that white folks were bear crawling through the jungles of Africa and hawked down an African on foot and threw a net on him and threw him on a boat. No, it did not go
And
down
took
like
him. You
that.
can't get. First of all, it's hard enough to get two crazy niggas inside the back of a cop car. But you better tell you took 100 million crazy niggas out that jungle and from the men
No.
from the land to the sea, boy. Then took them across the world, boy.
This is the
Come
power
on,
of the
now.
white man. Hey, you Yankee Akata,
Hey, bro.
you read those slave interview narratives, okay? One of them narratives said they tricked 200 to 300 Africans onto the boat and then just took off.
Yo, with one handkerchief.
One handkerchief gets you 300 Africans, okay? That's a return on investment.
Boy, I'm gonna tell you something, boy. That's crazy. With one handkerchief.
Yeah, that's all it takes. Now, we did have a super chat come through. I want to acknowledge. Shout out to Nocturne. Thank you for the support. They said, even though there were thousands of tribes, which tribes do you think the majority of Southerners descend from, and where should South Carolina, Kentucky, and Virginia look? We'll all answer first, and then I'll yield to UBTV.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of these tribes that we even know of nowadays weren't really tribes in the way that we understand tribes. For example, I'm technically a citizen of the tribe, the Muskogee Creek Nation, but the Muskogee Creek people were never like one tribe. We were like a confederacy of tribes. You've got some that after the Red Stick War, they go down to Florida, become the Seminoles. You got Yamasee. So it's not so much that you have to look at tribes or name of tribes. I would break it down by language group. You're going to have the Hichiti, the Muskogee language family in the Southeast. You're going to have the Algonquin, the Iroquoian language family in certain other areas. But I would always say, if we're going to go furthest back in time, and again, you can do your own fact checking, I would say most of these tribes in the Southeast, although they now go by different names, some given to them by Europeans, all of them colloquially descend from those that we would refer to as the Mississippian Mound Builders or the Eastern Woodland people. But what do you think about this question, UB?
I think you articulated that pretty well. Even the sense of tribes and how we understand them and how they've been defined by academia is just wrong, right?
Yeah.
Like you're talking about being Muskogee Creek. So you're really talking about two different tribes, and those tribes are a confederation of hundreds of tribes that span probably hundreds of miles.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, once again, you answered it great. It's more about, I would say it's more about ancestral bloodlines. So when we say, okay, we have Mississippian mound builders, understanding that all Mississippian mound builders, once again, is an all-inclusive term. It doesn't, it basically is supposed to include every mound builder doing a specific era that they've decided to label the chronology of. Yeah. So it's honestly kind of hard to necessarily define what someone is by tribal. That's why I think Ancestry is huge, because what happens is, you're Muskogee Creek. You could be, you could be Chitimacha Natchez, right? You could be Natchez Chickasaw, right? You could be Appalachie, Seminole, Cherokee, Catawba, Lenape, Powhatan. It's really about the region. Similar to how you were using language groups, I would also use geography. The one thing the borders can do, even though these are false borders, it can kind of give you an idea of general relation to certain people. And I'm sure that you found this out during your genealogy studies. When you start looking back, you'll see that these people, a big part of their people migrated, but they still have a large family unit that lives in this area. They could be from Louisiana or they could be from Virginia and live in Louisiana, but they're still genetically connected to those people in Louisiana. And those people actually might have a bigger faction of family in Georgia. Similar, I mean, it's really interesting because geography is big. Also, taking into the account the fact that our people have been rearranged. We've been taken to different areas. So from this area to that area to this area to that area. That's why I like the term general geography. The general geography of where you can find pockets of your family is the closest thing you're going to find to tribe, which tribe is family, right? Tribe is essentially an extended family that grows by birth and marriage, right? Sometimes tribes come together through marriage. Sometimes tribes come together through birth, right? So I liked how you answered it. There's no tribal stick, right? Even when I get into subjects of biblical, right? People will be like, well, you know, what tribe are we? Like, are we from tribe of Judah? Are we from tribe of... For one, that was so long ago, and the blood has been mixed for so long, and those people have already since amalgamated out of their tribal identities, that the only thing a person would have to have, like, some sort of like family heirloom passed down through hundreds or thousands of years, generations, that would be able to identify them as part of this biblical tribe. And somewhat could be said for these certain tribes, but these tribes really come down to geography, where these people decided to either have birth or interbreed in that location. So yeah, you could be you could have been born Chitimacha, and then shipped up to Virginia, and then you end up with some Powhatan or some Delaware Indians, right? So you could have been shipped to New York. You could have ended up with some Shinnecock. So all of these things have to be taken into consideration. That's why the origin, just the American origin in general, is so big for our people to start to understand. Once you get that, you can start to fill out your sense of identity. It's kind of like, it's interesting. It's like you can see, like, you know, there's like Black people from Ohio. There's a certain look that Black people from like the New York area have. There's certain Black people from Virginia have a certain look, and from Maryland have a certain look. From Georgia have and not like general, like, you know, there's this family who has this look. You know, they have certain eyes. Like, you know, I see cats on TV all the time who look like my family. You know what I'm saying? He might be from Memphis. You know what I mean? I've seen a guy play basketball for the Rockets. What's his name? Tari Eason looked like my first cousin. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying? So there's all of these geographic and genetic characteristics that kind of go along with the mixing of people, right? Yeah. Because just like we've saying, we're not all from the same tribe. And that goes all the way back until biblical times. Not only have we been mixed in from the Europeans, we've been mixed in with each other. So I like how you answered it. I would say it's more geographically related, more than tribal. And once again, unless you have some, you know, very old family heirloom that can kind of identify a tribe, we're all in kind of the same mixed bag, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And a lot of people are, you know, thinking that they might find ancestors on tribal roles, and they may or may not. But, you know, through the genealogy work that I do, and for anyone who's unfamiliar, who's new, just check out nativeblackAncestry.com. I'm a full-time genealogist, and I basically help Black Americans discover how to trace their genealogy so they don't get hoodwinked paying $5,000 on Ancestry.com to some genealogist who doesn't even know a damn thing about racial reclassification, right? But I'm glad that you touched on geography, because that's something that I really try to enlighten people to. You know, the only real degree of separation that I create when it comes to indigenous tribes in the Americas is the difference between us and what we'll call the Plains natives. You know, those folks were originally immigrants. Some claim they came across the Bering Strait. Some claim they came by boat. But we know that these folks are immigrants, which is why they settled in the most desolate, uninhabitable parts of the country, right? The deserts, the high deserts of North Mexico. Some of these folks try to call into my broadcast claiming that we came here from Africa, and, you know, the Navajos are the real indigenous people, and they'll start talking about Christopher Columbus and stuff. Like, no, Christopher Columbus was over there in the Caribbean. A lot of these Plains natives didn't even get European contact like that until the last phase of westward expansion.
Oh
Manifest
yeah, for sure.
Destiny.
Yeah, they're mostly they're mostly you got to think, and you can always look at the establishment of the earliest cities in Western expansion to even know when the history was touched. And yeah, I was going to say, especially like with the Plains Indians, the Dakotas, up into Canada, like most of that land unto this day is still uninhabitable. A lot of that land is
We were not
can't
hunter
grow anything.
gatherers. We weren't hunter gatherers roaming with the buffalo, living in teepees. We had cities, we had homesteads, we had farms, we had
Oh yeah, we had
agriculture.
nice
I mean,
structures. We didn't just have right. We probably the thing is, because all of our history was destroyed, I mean, we can only imagine what, pre-Columbian America really looked like.
if the Spanish are admitting in their journals that when they went to Central America and South America, they're seeing huge temples and buildings and floating cities on island cities like Mexico before
Right.
they dredged
Yeah,
Mexico and drained it.
yeah.
Yeah, so if that was like that in Central and South America, why are we to assume that we didn't have similar structures in the Southeast? I mean, a lot of you guys aren't familiar with LiDAR scanning, but LiDAR scanning is where they take ground penetrating radar and fly over a thick, jungle or thick forest, and through the LiDAR radar penetrating, they can actually tell what's beneath the surface without having to rip up the trees and do deforestation, right? They did LiDAR scanning on an island in Florida. They found a Mayan step pyramid island in Florida. Just in the last few years, they started doing LiDAR scanning of the Amazon rainforest. They're finding huge evidence of civilization, cities, temple structures, mounds that in some cases are almost identical to the structures we see in the Southeast. I mean, even my own tribe, the Muskogee people, have an oral tradition of migrating from Central America, from migrating from other parts. I mean, unless you've actually gone to the Caribbean, you don't realize like how close this stuff really is. I mean,
Yeah, like,
Cuba's
yeah.
right there. Like you can get in a canoe and like within a day or so be at the next island. So, the only distinction I really draw amongst indigenous people are really the true indigenous tribes, meaning you were here from the beginning of time, versus these Asiatic migrants like the Navajo, the Arapaho, the Comanche, the Apache, who unfortunately mainstream media has tried to convince you that's what the phenotype of an American Indian looks like. And that's not factual. I mean,
Yeah,
again,
they're
these
the
folks were the
non-aggressive
last.
Indians.
Yeah. These folks were the last to get European contact. When the white folks finally started to get on the covered wagons to go on the Oregon Trail, that's when they ran into some of the Plains natives, chopping off scalps and doing all that stuff. And guys, don't take my word for it. Look it up. The Plains natives got taken out and put on reservations in under 40 years. Our ancestors were infiltrated by several different European nations simultaneously for hundreds of years in order for them to even get a foothold. It took the Spanish over 100 years to even get off the beach of Florida because they were met with arrows as soon as they touched the sand. So it's like there's a big difference between who the true warlike indigenous people are and who these docile migrants are. And if we're the warlike people, and if the Europeans are trying to turn this into their new land, then what makes sense? Do they keep warring with these Black indigenous people, or do they capture some of them, enslave some in place, send some to the Caribbean, swap them around the Americas, miseducate their children to be raised with the notion that they come from Africa? So guess what? We don't even have to worry about them fighting for their land like their ancestors were, because they all think they came from Africa. Problem solved. I mean, if you think that you descend from a West African slave, the only thing that you'll ever advocate for is freedom from slavery and or civil rights. But if we found out that we were never brought here from Africa, that we were enslaved in place, made prisoners of war, colonized over hundreds of years, then not only would we want freedom from slavery, not only would we want civil rights, but we'd want our land back. And then the Europeans don't want to go back to Europe. That's the last thing they want to do. But I got to ask you, UB, and
I want to jump on.
Wrapping up.
I wanted to say something too. Also, you had mentioned about the Plains Indians. There's also evidence that there was a lot of Black Plains Indians as well. A lot of Indians in the Plains were also Black. They just weren't concentrated in large populations like further south, right? That's why, for one, they never got touched during colonization because nobody had made it that far westward or inland or even cared to really colonize, Dakotas. They just like, okay, listen, man, we're trying to get the whole country, so we got to take y'all out. But I mean, nobody really wants the Dakotas. Nobody wants it. It's still there. You can probably go live in Dakota for like $500 a month.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Don't nobody want to live in the Arizona desert, Nevada desert. Like it's not It's not popping like that. And just
Right.
phenotypically speaking, there's a huge difference between an Indian that looks like this and an Indian that looks like this.
Oh yeah. Right.
Big difference from an Indian that looks like this. I mean, she looks like her daddy's Genghis Khan, right? Now compare that to an Indian that looks like this. Or one that looks like this. And I can keep going and keep going. But guys, if you have any last questions for UB before we wrap up, go ahead, start posting them in the chat. If you really want to make sure your question's asked, send a super chat. But I got to ask you, UB, when you first started to dive into this history, started to realize just how deep the rabbit hole goes, what was the biggest shift for you personally after learning all of this?
You know, I had this. This is true. I became more open-minded, more willing to accept pushback. I think even with information, you know, so like when I first started doing this, like I said, I was really genuinely trying to learn our history, and of course, it started off in a Pan-African lane. And once I started, once I really started getting into indigenous history, you know, the Pan-Africans started hating me. I mean, literally, I was every coon in the book. And it's funny because now, full circle, those Pan-Africans have come back around on me. Now they indigenous too. Now they claiming the same thing that they were calling me all kinds of names for. It's funny how life works. But with that being said, I think mainly the thing that I learned the most is not trying to take opposing views so seriously, or even my information so seriously. I do put a lot of work into my information, so by the time it hits the cutting room floor, I've had time to think about it. And I'm not really I'm not opposed to opposition or opposing views. I think I would have reacted to them in the past a little more passionately. I mean, it's not that I'm not passionate about it, but I'm so confident in my position, and I don't necessarily look at someone who disagrees with my information as necessarily a personal attack, nor does it matter. I don't really get mad at personal attacks anymore. It doesn't bother me. You know, so I think the transition for me is just not really caring what other people think about the information. You know, I try to do the best I can. I'm solid, you know, I'm right with the Most High. That's good with me. As far as, you know, what you think about my work, I understand that you may not agree and you may hate me for putting out information that you disagree with, but that shit doesn't faze me at all. And I think that was a major thing that I had to learn. Like like now, you know, people still hate on me and they leave crazy comments or whatever, but it don't bother me. I'm confident in the information, and I also know that it's not worth getting into a debate with someone who can't actually offer anything of substance to the conversation, because I'm willing to take any sort of criticism of the work, like genuinely and in good faith, understanding that I don't know everything. By the time I put something out, I am pretty solid in my position, but whether your position agrees with mine or not, I don't have to take it personally. I don't have to react. I don't lose any sleep over it. I don't waste any energy on people who disagree with my information.
I see that makes perfect sense, brother. And I got to ask you, with the content that you create, are you more so trying to convert naysayers or provide historical resources for those who are already on their journey of discovery?
Yeah, that's what if you're not vibing with me, I don't care if you ever vibe with me. You see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not looking, I like for new people to come across my channel and really like the stuff. But I mean, this is truly like for the love of the game. Like, I do this because I love it. I found a passion with it. I like learning new things. I like sharing what I've learned. I like making dope videos. I like using my brother's music. I really just want to be as good as I possibly can be in this space, because, you know, this has provided me with the work, of course, but this is, you know, I have earned this passion. So I don't want to sell the game short. I don't want to sell the people who believe in me short. The people who have been supporting me since I started this journey, are very important to me. So I don't want to leave them hanging either. So I always strive to try to, even when I make new videos, I always want to, my next video I want it to be better than my last one. And I don't ever want to like take a huge step back. I just want to continually get better, and make people proud that they had confidence in my stuff. Like, I want people to be like, yeah, I fuck with UB. He been on a shit. As a matter of fact, I remember when he was making his videos on the phone, and now he's making, now I make a lot better and higher quality. And in time, the quality is going to get better, and the videos are going to get better. And I'm always thinking about ways to innovate and make better documentaries. I'm still putting out a Lost at Home publication along with the publications related to my other work as well. So yeah, man, ain't nothing lost on me. I love the game, man. I'm so grateful to the Most High that He's allowed me to work in this space, because working like this, I mean, it just takes a lot of faith. You know what I mean? Like, it just takes a lot of faith. I can't. It's hard to articulate, but every time, just having faith has always been good enough for me. And I think that's just a testament to I feel like I'm on the right path, because every time the Most High He looks out for me when I'm down. He looks out for me. My work isn't bad. Even when I think my work isn't as good as it's supposed to be, it turns out to be better than I thought it was. And that's because I really care about it. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And I definitely see a lot of similarities as far as our missions and motivations. I got to ask you though, have you noticed within like the last couple years or even to a few years that it seems to be like a cultural shift? A lot of people in my community have dubbed it the Great Awakening, but it's almost like Black Americans just woke up one day with a new software update and realized, wait a minute, Grandma did say we Cherokee. Uncle did say we Yamasee. I mean, so-and-so did say we. It's like we all simultaneously across the U.S. Some of us never talk to each other. Some of us don't even watch the same videos. But we all just kind of woke up one day and we're like, wait a minute, let's start looking into our genealogies. Something doesn't add up. But I don't think I descend from Africans. I mean, since you've been in these social media spaces for much longer than I, have you noticed an increase in that at all? Or?
Oh yeah, for sure. Absolutely. There's definitely been a shift within the community. I think the pocket of the people who are starting to subscribe, especially to the ideas that you and I have, I do think that they try to keep that pocket very limited, because the reason we're bringing it up is because it's due to social media. For these platforms where people can share thoughts and ideas with people they don't know. Once again, this is, I don't think, their expectation when it came to the creation of social media is, they'll be sharing ratchet videos, not actually, not
all these
real
niggas doing
history.
TikTok dances.
Right. Yeah. That's what they want us to do, bro.
Yeah.
That's what they want us to do. So, we've used social media. We flipped the script on their ass real quick. For real.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And also, something.
And by the way,
really
hold that question. By the way, I wanted to answer one part of the question. Like, I'm not looking to convert anybody, by the way.
Yeah, perfect.
Like, if you ain't rocking with me, cool. It's all good. And I want to say this is that I have a lot of people who support me, who are dealing with friends and family members who maybe they're trying to convert them. And, maybe they're even using my content to try to convert friends and family members. Understand, if it's meant for you, it ain't gonna miss you. And so even with me, I don't try to convert family members or friends or anything like that. If they see how I'm rocking and it's something they may be interested in, cool. But don't give yourself a headache trying to force ideas upon your loved ones that they're not ready for. Like, this is a spiritual war and everybody's spirit ain't the same and everybody doesn't take the information the same. It's okay. Okay. Don't let that get you out of shape. Stay on your path. Okay. Continue.
Yeah, no, I'm the same exact way. And if I was asked that question, I would answer almost identically, right? Like I'm just trying to provide historical resources for those who are on their journey. I mean, that's why I even started providing genealogy consultations, because when me and my family were doing our genealogy back in 2021, and we find out great grandpa was a chief and da 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 da, and we get tribal citizenship, I just reflect on that, and I'm like, damn, I wish there was someone who could have set that trail, could have blazed the way. You know, I wish there was some kind of services or something. And unfortunately, our community is really disenfranchised when it comes to not just true history, but also things like genealogy, right? I mean,
Right. Yeah,
we
for
got a
sure.
lot of folks who are thinking that they can just take a DNA test and that somehow DNA has something to do with genealogy, when those are two completely different fields of study. So, you know, I come from that same cloth where it's like, I'm not trying to convert. I'm trying to provide tools and resources for those that are already walking that path. On
Right.
my platform, me and my followers have a saying, the ancestors are in the algorithm. And it does appear to be that way to a degree. You know, sometimes we'll come across a video at the right time. And obviously we know some of it is the crazy shit they doing with social media and listening to our phones and stuff. But you might be talking to
Yeah,
a
yeah,
cousin
for
about
sure.
the
Right, right, right.
1860 census, and next thing you know, you get a UBTV
Yeah,
video recommended
yeah.
or a Mike TV video recommended. So yeah, I definitely come from that same sentiment. But I got to ask you now, why is it that Indigenous scholars like you, like we're not trying to convert? We're just basically lovers of history and want to share the different things that we find in real time as we find them. But when it comes to the Pan-Africans or even other, you know, groups, it seems like their whole identity is predicated on convincing us all that we come from Africa like they think they do. I never get a Pan-African call in and be like, hey, I did my genealogy, my ancestor was shipped here in Ghana, and that's the end of the story. No, it's always, I did a DNA test, it said I'm African, so you're not Indian, you're really an African. So why do you think that so many other groups of thought function like a virus, where they think the only way they can survive is if they infect more hosts, whereas folks like us just kind of do our own thing, and whoever gravitates, whoever doesn't, doesn't?
Because they all rely on intellectual laziness, intellectual apathy. They don't, honestly, they don't. It's like these are the same people who just want the answers to the test. They don't actually want to know what the test is. They don't really want to know, learn the answers that they need to know for the test. They just want to be given the answers to the test. So they, in both cases, whether it's the Pan-African or the person who acts like they're looking for their history, their family history, who takes the DNA test, that is intellectually lazy. And that's, you know, honestly, that's where my work came in. I didn't want to be intellectually lazy. And once I stonewalled our true history, that's when I had to start digging deeper. That's when I had to start reading between the lines. And on this journey, I've become so much more aware. I'm a top level reader and comprehender. I can often read between the lines. I can see lies before they're written. Things that I could not have done if I was intellectually lazy. I care too much to be on that bullshit. I care too much to just accept somebody's answers as the truth. And that goes all the way even down to scripture. You know, my SBF series, we even question the words that are in scripture. But that's because I'm not intellectually lazy. And shout out to my people, because I do think that I have a very high intellect following where they're not going to let me get away with it, and they're not intellectually lazy either. And so I actually like being intellectually challenged by people who are really interested in the subject, because it's like we're in a brain trust. You know what I mean? Where there's this cooperation of working to gain a better understanding. It's a beautiful thing. Yeah. They don't have that. They're just lazy. And they're looking, you know, for as much evil as these people claim white people do, they scour the white person's information like it's the gospel. And they regurgitate false white man information like it's the gospel.
Yeah. It's very, very unfortunate, to say the least. And one of the last questions I have for you, and actually this is probably going to be the last question that I have, but I think I saw a couple more super chats that we'll quickly acknowledge before we wrap up. But what impact do you hope that your work has on our community?
You know, I want Impact, I just want to be a legitimate source for my people, a source that my people can be proud of, a source that that is reliable, that is respected. And that's really my objective. I want to be a reliable source. I honestly want to be able to put out more content. I honestly want to be able to create a network. Like, my dream is to be able to do this on a network level where my own network, by the way, where I produce all the content. I create all the content. It's not just historical content, it's content across the board. That's my ultimate dream. Who knows if I'll ever get there? But this is, who knows if I'll even want that, or I'll get somewhere in a couple of years and I realize that that's not really what I wanted, because that's how I ended up here anyway. So, as long as I'm doing what I love, the people respect it. They know I ride with them. I literally love the people who support me. I do. Because of their support, I've been able to create a purpose for myself.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's amazing, and we will definitely stay locked in, because a lot of your goals, your mission, your manifesto, if you will. I mean, it's like looking at a mirror. I'm like, if I was about 20 years older, I'd be this brother right here. I mean, just damn near a carbon copy as far as mission and motivation. And with that said, kind of a second part of that question, now that I think about it, what change do you hope to see within our community over the next 10 years, 20 years? I know some people think about reparations. I know I personally have a milestone of one day sitting in front of Congress, having a congressional hearing about the racial reclassification of Indigenous Black Americans. But if you can wave a magic wand, over the next 10 or 20 years, what realistic change do you hope to see within our community?
Well, I mean, as it relates to our work, like this, the idea of us being Indigenous American, not African, I just want it to be solidified. And it doesn't have to be solidified like in front of Congress, as you say. It just needs to be solidified within the psyche of our people, because there is once you learn these things, there's a certain way you carry yourself. There's a certain way that we operate. And I can't foresee the future past that point, but I know that would be a good starting point. We just need to change our mentality. The victimhood, but we are constantly a victim of our own decisions. And with that, with my wish of the future of our people to not only take this information, to also take accountability for where we are socially in the world. Because I think those two things go hand in hand. And the accountability is big, because a lot of this Afro nonsense is based in like huge denial, even to the point of blasphemy in some cases.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. Just having this knowledge really makes you maneuver different. It makes you think of things differently. It just totally changes your whole lifestyle. I mean, everything changes when you realize that, wait a minute, all those feelings that you felt through K through 12, or some just didn't sit right with you in history class, and they making us sing plantation songs and picking cotton on field trips. I mean, before I ever got tribal citizenship, I always felt like that we had ties to this land, that I just was never called to Africa. And a lot of us are on that journey of discovery. And it's really great to have people like you who are blazing the trail, because your work has been a great personal inspiration to me and has really inspired me to go harder and make more content, because I, just like you, hope that we have a network, just like they have political networks and people can start their own, MSNBC nowadays through social media. I mean,
right.
We need to have that that's really centered on the truth and the understanding that most of us, not all of us, because if you're a Pangoofy and you think that your folks came from Africa, okay, I'll let you have that. But most of us have Indigenous American roots. And once that's rectified and realized on a national level, I think that we can really see some change happen. But real quick, before we wrap up, let me do one more look through the comment section. I know we had some super chat questions.
Okay.
Let's see here. Nocturne says, then all of the artifacts, remains, bodies, and bones found that resemble us disappear or are destroyed. I guess it seems like more of a statement instead of a question, but
no, absolutely.
What do you think about that statement? Yeah.
Yeah, there's a ton of artifacts that resemble us. I mean, that's the thing. A lot of these artifacts are the things that they can't refute because they have to use anthropology to determine ethnicity of certain things and characteristics. So it's a little more vague. But once they dig up a 2,000-year-old gold vessel that looks like us, you see what I mean? It's hard to refute. Now you're saying that these Siberians came across the world and start making figurines of little Negroes. Make sense. So yeah. And on the anthropology subject, so not only are the oldest bodies exhumed here in the Americans, us, the original indigenous American that appears as a Negro being a term, okay? The oldest artifacts that depict people in the Americas depict us. Okay. And all of those artifacts are older than any African artifacts, and also the civilizations here as well. They've been lying about chronology, and they do that to give their false history some sort of substance based in a false antiquity. When we can clearly see, now that we understand their games, that they've been lying about the antiquity of the Americas in general. So when you're seeing, just go look at some of the videos. Go look at the Gold War. There are several videos that you can go look at because that's the most recent one that's on my mind. But if you go look at like the Mayan whitewash, or if you go look at flooded foundations, or if you go look at Hebrews in America, you're going to see the oldest depictions of any people, period, are Negroes. The oldest people that have been found on the continent are Negroes. Now it's interesting. So we have Luzia in South America, who was a Negro. Then we have Naya, who was supposedly a Negro who was found in the Yucatan. And the reason I say supposedly because she's supposed to actually have some of those Siberian markers, specifically shovel-shaped incisors, because I looked it up. But nonetheless, she still appears as a black woman, as someone from Africa. The only difference is she had some Siberian mixed in that Luzia didn't have. And these are things that they just kind of leave out. Now that's in the Yucatan, and that's in South America. They've exhumed hundreds and hundreds of graves here in America, but they won't come out with a definite ethnicity because the current tribes are used as as gatekeepers of the truth. Okay. Yep. So they use, don't touch our sacred grounds. Now you would think that they would want to learn more, maybe dig somebody up to see. No, it's sacred. They're not digging nobody up. And so they're basically by them stonewalling, they're hiding the ethnicity. But yes, all of the oldest depictions, all of the handmade figurines are all Negroes. All of the bodies right are all Negroes. Yeah, they're all Negroes. No, there's in Mexico. Ain't nobody ever pulled a little Siberian man up out the ground that's 2,000 years old. Didn't happen. Siberians weren't around 2,000 years ago in America. That is.
Come on. Don't take my word for it. Look it up. They even have an Olmec statue in a Mexico museum called El Negro.
Yep, they do.
All right. Hey, just the other day, I purchased a book. This is the English translation. This book is written by a Portuguese scholar in 1994. Its original title is Negros de Terras. In English, that translates to Blacks of the Land. This literally talks about the enslavement of indigenous people and how from day one, the Spanish were reclassifying indigenous people as Creole, as Negros de Terra, which translates to natives of the land, blacks of the land. They would even call them uno de los indios if they were, living near missions or were already converted, et cetera, et cetera. So it's like, people want to get online and convince you that you come from an African, but they can't explain why Portuguese scholars admit that the first indigenous people found here were called blacks of the land. Matter of fact, here's a super quick, not even a paragraph, a sentence I'll read. It says here that the very term Indio has been refined over the course of the century. It serves as evidence of a process. In documentation from the period, the term refers only to the inhabitants of mission villages. The vast majority of the indigenous population received the suggestive denomination of Negros da Terra, literally blacks of the land, hence native blacks. And guess what they would call the Africans when they did bring some Africans over? They called them Negros de Guinea, blacks of Africa. They knew from day one there's black people
Right.
already. They weren't Africans. They weren't from Africa. But we're going to allow the descendants of the British who were here 100 years after the Spanish be our source on indigenous history, when the Spanish, all of their journals, all their depictions talk about all these black folks they ran into.
Yeah.
But you know what? Before we wrap up, I see some more super chat questions. I'm not even going to try to butcher this. So just go ahead and read to respond to this comment from Tyrone UB. I know I'm going to butcher them names.
I had to hook up with Oki1, E, Nai. Yeah, I got to look up Oki.
He
Yeah.
going deep with it, huh? He going deep.
I don't know, bro. But yeah, I'll look him up. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, I'll look him up, Tyrone. I'll look him up, Ty.
Yeah, and I'm assuming Tyrone might be talking about some of the indigenous tribes in the Carolinas.
Oh yeah, he's deep. Yo, he's deep with it. He be using every freaking letter in the name. He gonna use it. I didn't see them.
You do. Hey, for real.
Hey,
Tyrone comes heavy-handed with the indigenous.
Yeah.
knowledge,
Oh yeah, he heavy-handed for sure.
All right. Here's another question. Someone said, "Am I right to believe the New Testament was made up by the Roman Greek?"
Yes, and I mean really all the translations of the Old Testament as well. I think people don't understand. There's not really an original Hebrew. It is back translated from some of the oldest Aramaic and Greek, and so a lot of this stuff kind of gets conflated when we start to look at it trying to understand like who actually wrote the stuff. This stuff is all oral history that gets recorded at later dates, and then throughout the times prior to the compilation of, say, the first Gutenberg press, we just have different books that basically, I don't even want to say it's the church. Certain scribes came together to compile into a single text that's supposed to be somewhat authoritative based off this united understanding of oral mythology. And it also stands to say that, we don't know exactly who wrote it, but we know that there's no real original Hebrew text, in a sense of that we have. Everything's, like I said, everything's been back translated. And you can actually find that out once you start going through some of the concordances, and you'll see how they develop even some of the most popular concordances. I mean, I've only been on this path for a little bit, but I've busted Strong's Concordance multiple times just on the meaning of words, the definitions of words. So yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
And you know what? I actually do have one final question, if I can. What do you think about the modern world's religions? Because even though I'm not a religious scholar, I really don't get deep into the religious texts like someone like yourself does. I've always felt, and I'm going to say felt, this is an intuition. This is not a theory backed by any kind of sources. This is my personal conjecture. I've always felt that all of these religions were kind of bastardized versions of our spiritual systems, especially when I hear of Spanish conquistadors somehow knowing the legends of some of the indigenous tribes and using it to make them think that they're messengers of Waxacotl and they're sent from God and da 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 da. I mean, so I know a lot of people are still under the spirit of Christianity and things of that nature, and I feel like there's a seed of truth to it somewhere, which is why we're pulled to it. But how else can we describe it other than a bastardized version of our indigenous spiritual systems?
Yeah, so for one, I separate the New Testament and the Old Testament completely. With that being said, yes, it is a bastardized representation of the prior religion of the Americas. And this, for one, they're just like different tribes. There are different practices. The reason we could say America is Egypt, once again, is based off the mythology of the Old Testament and the stories based in the Old Testament. With the majority of the religions that you're referring to being Abrahamic, that would literally be, it's basically a diverged proxy arm of the original source being the early indigenous, the prior indigenous history of the Americas. By the way, nobody else was practicing any of these religions to this extent until we were discovered in America. They didn't even, for lack of a better word, the Bible didn't exist in a form that it didn't even exist really. The first copies of the New Testament were in 1452, and there's much evidence to believe that they just used the prior indigenous religious history in order to write in Christ as a Messiah figure and use that Christ figure as a tactic of war.
Which is interesting because all colonizers, even conquistadors, the conquistadors were the military mercenaries, but they always had missionaries with them, friars, religious people.
Right.
A lot of their expeditions were literally blessed by the, papal bulls, inter cantera, all these different things. And some of you guys don't realize the King James Bible was commissioned in 1604, published in 1611, but they've been over here colonizing us since the 1400s. So when I say I feel in my heart of hearts that they were still in our stuff, remixing it and then using it to enslave us in our homeland, so some of the facts that UBTV presents on this channel, it really does support that notion. I mean, why is it that they were able to convert some Indians and create what they called praying towns, where a whole Indian town will convert to Christianity and erect crosses and stuff? Well, they must have told them something that they believed, that they gravitated towards. Right. And we all know long before you actually put boots on the ground and invade a country, you do reconnaissance. And there were many voyages. I'm not sure if we can close out by you commenting on this, but there was many voyages to the Americas before Christopher Columbus. I mean, they're finding Vikings, Newfoundland, they're finding evidence of other, factions coming over here before Columbus, but mainstream academia wants us to just set the time with Columbus in 1492. Right. Yeah,
I mean, I think the biggest part of that, the biggest piece of evidence is the fact, like you were talking about, the papal bulls and the Pope, inter caetera and even dum diversus were all based off a supposedly undiscovered continent. So it's like they were already writing literature for something that historically had yet to exist. Obviously, that's indicative of somebody knowing something that is just not being recorded.
Yeah, I totally agree. Well, hey, brother, I could talk to you for 2 more hours. We'll definitely have to do this sometime in the future. And guys, if you haven't yet subscribed to UBTV, go to his channel, subscribe to him. Let's get him to 90,000 subscribers, and stay tuned. I think we're planning on maybe doing an interview where I'll be over on his channel. So, if you guys like the collaboration, we definitely have more to come. Also, can you just plug your I'm not going to get it exactly right, but can you plug your way that people can support you, where they give you a donation and then they get like not just a video like a month before it drops, but all of your receipts, all of the documents? I mean, I know every time I get those emails, I'm like, this is a treasure trove of information. But if you can explain that process to folks who want to support your work.
Got you. Appreciate that. So you can donate. I've got Cash App, Zelle, PayPal. If you donate for a video, this is the way it works. If you donate, I always send you a video. If you give me $3, a $3 donation gets you a single view video. It does not come with references or resources or books. A $10 donation gets you all the references, resources, and books, and actually gets you 2 extra videos. I say the next video, but most people who donated $10 know I send you 3 videos instead of 2.
Yep.
Just because, I listen, you show me love, I show you love. I mean, that's typically how it works. And the reason I haven't gone to any like recurring payment options, I know people keep them asking. They ask about Patreon. Patreon's actually stolen thousands of dollars from me, because my last channel got shut down. So out of GP, I just won't mess with Patreon. And then also just don't want to be a bill for somebody. I don't need you to be on your last $2 on the 19th and you be all of a sudden auto drafts $10 out of your shit. I'm not that guy. You see what I'm saying? So I like it kind of set up the way it is now, where if you've and everybody knows that if you've been showing me love, I just shoot you the video. Like, you know, after a while, you know, donation doesn't matter. There's been people who haven't donated in probably months or even years who still get videos because they once showed me love. And I don't mean like one $3 donation in 2023. Like, you got to, like, you know, show me legit love. You know what I mean? Because I know a lot of people, you know, there have been people who say, yeah, I've seen every video. I've been watching you for years. And like, and they will want a video. Like, bro, I don't mind giving you a video because you support me. But bro, you've been watching my stuff for 3 years, over 100 hours of my content. You ain't sent me $1 yet, and you want me to send you a free video? Come on, bro.
Come on.
Come on. I'm trying to look out for my people, but like the amount of people who really try to take advantage of me when I look out for everybody is ridiculous. But I definitely appreciate the love. And with that being said, my strong base of consistent supporters are always there for me. They get me through every month. But yeah, if you donate $10, not only do you get the resources for this video, the next video, and the video after. I mean, how can you beat that deal? I've done so much work, and all my videos are a minimum an hour. By the way, I only used to do like 45-minute videos. Now they're hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours. A full edit, bro. That means writing, editing. You know how long it takes me to make a video? I can't get $3 about you, bro. You don't see 100 hours of my content that took 100,000.
Shout out to Christopher.
Bro, I can't get $1.
Christopher
bro.
says, I feel bad for just watching all the videos. Now, Christopher, you better send this brother $3. You don't got all this free game.
Damn, Christopher, holla at your boy.
Yeah. No, and honestly, that's why I took the time out to have you plug that, because just like how you want to start a network, I want to start a network. A lot of people talk about the frequency that I do live streams, and like I can only do that because I do this full time and I'm supported by the community. You guys book genealogy consultations, you go to the website, you check out the archive. And in that same vein, we need to be financially supporting a brother like UBTV, because that's the only way that we can really get this into the.
And my channel's not monetized, by the way. But I don't know, like I don't have any control over commercials on my channel. I don't make $1 from YouTube. My channel's currently under warning, by the way. My channel's never been monetized. So I don't know if there's this false impression that I'm getting paid from YouTube. I'm not. The only way I get paid is through donations. So that's another thing too. Like my not only my channel can't be monetized, it's not monetized. And then most of the time YouTube hits it with petty copyright strikes, which is interesting now because the pettiest of the copyright strikers now is my brother's music label. So when I play my brother's music, I can't even play my brother's music for free. His label's trying to come in, and bro, I had to tell him, I'm like, bro, what's the deal with your label? Like I was watching a video, it's like 10 fucking commercials in the first 30 minutes. And his label's the only label that's copyrighting my stuff. Now I have to watch out for stuff like that, but it's like I can use stuff, but it's like, you know, I want my brother, I want him to make the money. That's obviously. And
someone asking for the Cash App. What's the handle of your Cash App?
$UBNEWZ.
Yep. UBNEWZ, right, guys? And y'all already know how I get down. Y'all know I don't be promoting or endorsing no one that I don't personally support. So go ahead and Cash App this brother if you got the budget to do so. I personally sent the brother some Cash Apps too, because y'all don't understand, like, unless you've watched his videos, which a lot of you guys have, like, it isn't just history, but it's so us culturally, just how he presents it, the quirky jokes, you know,
try to be entertainment, man. I want people to enjoy watching. Yeah.
Every time he drops a video, I kid you not, I roll a joint and I sit down for an hour and a half and watch that motherfucker from start to finish, because it's just such good content. And some of you guys have seen me reacting to his videos on my channel, so you already know how peak his content truly is. I saw someone actually leave a comment saying, something about DVDs. I know that you're sending me a DVD. Can you also let the folks know how they can get your Lost at Home series on DVD?
Yeah. Just reach out an email. If you reach out an email to me, I'll do, like I used to do them for 25. I'll do them for 20 now. It might be the last DVD run I'm gonna do, because I don't want to say it. It's just kind of an obsolete. It's obsolete and it's expensive to do like DVDs. It's either time expensive, or for me, it was cost expensive, because I had to get, you know, you got to order 500 DVDs for it to make sense. You know what I'm saying? So now you in a hole, a couple $1,000s or whatever. But I will be doing flash drives. So
People been
I'm
asking
going to
me
be
for
sending you.
DVDs too, and I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't even know if I had a DVD. I don't even know where to play
Yeah,
it off
where you
of.
can play it.
Like,
Exactly. But people I am going to be sending, I send out flash drives. I still have to send a flash drive at the same time I mail out your DVD as well. I sent somebody a DVD like last week. And the main reason I haven't really been pushing the DVDs is because it's the Lost at Home from 2020. And I do plan on doing a new one this year. You know, I'm getting my
Nice.
ducks in a row now. So be on the lookout for that joint. It's going to be bananas. It's going to be better than the first one, better than the second one, third one. Well, you know, there's a little better than the first two. This is going to be, it's going to be like that.
Nice. Well, we also need to give folks your email. So what's the email address again?
ub.newz.tv@gmail.com.
And is news spelled normally or with a
No,
Z?
it's spelled with a Z.
Okay, so
Because that was my name before.
news,
Right.
ub.news, and then what's next?
.tv.
.tv. And is that like at Gmail or at Yahoo or
At
something?
Gmail.
Or?
Yeah, at Gmail.
At gmail.com. All right, hold on real quick. Let me get it on the screen and you can confirm if this looks good. ub.news.tv at
No,
gmail.com.
NEWZ.
And okay,
NEWZ.
so it is NWZ. Okay, I got it. Let me just make a quick switch right there. Because, yeah, we definitely need a rally behind this brother right here. I swear, this right here is a dream come true, being able to chop it up with him, because I've watched countless hours of his content. I think I got it right now, right? ub.news with a Z.tv at Gmail.
Yep.
All right, perfect. So
Yes,
if you guys
sir.
want to reach out to support the brother, get a DVD, get a flash drive, you can email him. If anybody wants to support him via Cash App, that's his Cash App handle, $UB News with a Z instead of an S at the end. Definitely make sure to go subscribe to his channel, UBTV. And if you guys want to see another collaboration between us, you know what you need to do. Go support the brother, subscribe, fill the comment section under this video, under his videos, and let us know if that's what the people want. Let's get the people going.
Yes, sir.
Hey, brother,
yes, sir.
go ahead and give us some closing remarks, and then we'll wrap up this broadcast.
Hey, man, all I want to say is much love to the people, man. Shout out to you, Mike. I see you doing good work. I appreciate your diligence. I appreciate your professionalism. These are all things that we, that make people legitimate within the community. So I just want to say I appreciate you, brother. You're a good brother. Everything we've done has been square. So you guys support my brother here. He's been doing his thing. I saw him come out, and just so you know, he's free to use whatever. The thing I like about Mike is when he wants to use some of my content, he'll ask me. You know what I'm saying? Like, just the flatline courtesy, respect, I appreciate, man. So yeah, man. Much love to everybody who's been supporting me, man. Without y'all, I don't be doing this. So y'all are part of this journey, bro. That's all I want to say, man. Shalom. Two paths to the chest, two fingers to the sky. All praise to the Most High.
Well, until next time, thank you guys for tuning in. For everybody watching live, don't go anywhere. As soon as this broadcast ends, it's going to automatically push you into the next broadcast. I'm going to be doing some more live streaming. Unfortunately, UB got to get up out of here, but we may see him back on the channel in the near future if that's what the folks want.
Yes, sir.
But thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for showing up and showing out. And sit tight. Another live stream is starting right now. Many know about slavery, but few discuss paper genocide. We did not all come from Africa, and most of us have Aboriginal roots that were stripped away due to reclassification and miseducation. As a native Black American and a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation, I understand the importance of tracing your lineage. If you want to learn how to trace your genealogy and apply for tribal citizenship, go to nativeblackancestry.com to schedule a consultation.
They don't want you to remember this. You not no slave, you indigenous. Fuck how they painted them Indians. You went to war with the French and the British, man. Quite frankly, you was kings, Merovingians. They took the women and men, made them prisoners, raised up the children to worship their images, set up a lab to the genes and they mixed them, and this shit get way deeper than your pigment.